We're ready. Good morning. I'd like to welcome you today to the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners meeting October 14th, 2020. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to rearrange these. The
Okay.
flag should be on the left.
Let's please.
Flag.
Let's get
Just like that.
very good. Thank you very much. Okay, I do have one email for citizen input, and it's from Tricia Kingdom. She wants to express her disappointment in regards to the Thornburg Development and Golf Course. To approve another water-guzzling golf course and subdivision is completely irresponsible on the part of our commission. With Wickiup Reservoir completely run dry for the second time in recent history, farmers and ranchers already stretched thin on their water supplies and local residents being asked to conserve and limit landscaping usage. It seems like prioritizing the recreation of the upper middle class and elite is short-sighted at best. Whose interests do you have at heart? It is clearly not the citizens of Deschutes County, or you wouldn't make such a careless and unthoughtful decision. So thank you, Trish, for sending in your comment.
So just a real quick, I want to thank her very much for the input. We've got input like that a few times, and we've said a few things on those lines. There's a big difference between the live flow of snow melt and the reservoirs filling up annually and being utilized for irrigation, but also pumping groundwater. When you look at the water resources on the east side of the Cascades, they say there's a lot of water here, and it's all about distribution and allocation. We live in a water mitigation basin, which means there's no new water rights to be had. So to be able to do development, you're transferring water rights from one to another. And also for a resort development like this, it's a conceptual master plan and a final master plan and then an application to develop. So it's a shame that, people are kind of concluding that right now we've approved a golf course, but it really has been in the works for many, many years.
Since 2005.
It's a dry year, but as I say, it's allocated water from other water rights. It's not new water rights. So there's just a big picture here, and I mean, thank you very much for getting engaged and providing feedback to us.
Yes. It was approved in 2005, and I believe they've had 32 appeals on that. So what we were approving was an historical perspective, and I know it probably people today wonder, but thank you.
Yeah, it's just a big picture. Yep.
Yes, the big picture is such that I do want to remind everyone, I'm sure you're very well aware of it, that the ballots will be mailed today. And then you can start dropping them off or mailing them. But remember, in Oregon, you must mail them to arrive in time by November 3rd. So there is a cutoff date, and it's, if you want, you can just drop them off. You can drop them off in many locations, and Nancy Blankenship, our elections clerk, will be receiving them. This is not a time to stop Nancy in the hallway. I did that yesterday. She is an amazing person. She's a great partner for democracy and action. She does an outstanding job. So thank you, Nancy. And we have a consent agenda.
Yeah, so I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
And I will second it as chair. Further discussion?
I just want to thank Bill Olson of Deschutes County Historic Landmarks Commission for serving, and then welcome Dan Ellington to that Historic Landmarks Commission.
Great. Commissioner DeBonne?
I'll vote yes.
And the chair votes yes. So thank you very much. All right. We have the first action item on our agenda, something that we have been working on. It's been on the county watch for probably decades. So, Chris Doty.
Morning, Board.
Good morning.
Again, Chris Doty, Road Department Director. And yes, decades plus, I think. Several months ago, Board, we met with representatives of the Crosswater subdivision and other stakeholders to address a kind of a heightened issue at Harper Bridge this summer with regard to pedestrian safety. And then there's some variety of other issues as well. At the conclusion of that meeting with them, we went and implemented an emergency 25-mile-per-hour speed limit kind of through that affected area. Of course, the board at that meeting, I believe, passed the bridge jumping ordinance, which was something that was lacking in county code. And then with that, county law enforcement was also communicated with, and increased enforcement took place given the heightened sensitivity around safety issues at the bridge. I spoke with Captain Garrison this morning. He was unable to make the meeting or to tune in. He's tied up in training today. But he did communicate to me that he felt that they had achieved the compliance that they were seeking with that added enforcement and the other the ordinance and the speed reduction. So he felt pretty good about how the summer progressed, especially after that point. However, at the conclusion of that meeting several months ago, board, you asked that we come back with some ideas about things we can do in the coming months and years, perhaps, with regard to the issues at Harper. And so with that, I prepared a memo, Tom and I did, that kind of addresses some options for discussion. It's not a full revisitation of the report that was put to you in 2018 that kind of threw the whole umbrella over everything, but really some new ideas and some things that could be considered, just given some of the issues that have arisen. So with that, I'll kind of maybe just walk you through the memo and the options, and we can talk about that. The primary issues of safety that were kind of raised at the meeting several months ago and observed by many were twofold. One, pedestrian crossings. So there's the perception that pedestrians are just haphazardly crossing the roadway, not looking at traffic, so to speak, and kind of caught up in the activity. And then also general concern for pedestrians just walking to and from the river, going east-west, up and down the side of the road, conflicting with what they're carrying in the way of inner tubes and things that they want to put in the river, and cyclists and whatnot. So those were kind of the primary issues. Secondary issues, addressed and brought forward by Crosswater and others were, the amount of some trespassing and litter and other issues that they've observed as well. So with that, I categorized kind of the options in various groupings, and the first two deal specifically with the issue to eliminate pedestrian crossings and the ability for pedestrians to cross Spring River Road. And so the first one is elimination of parking and river access on one side of Spring River Road could be considered. And in that case, it would involve some fencing, probably from the bridge to the parking area, and then some barricades that would be placed, Jersey barrier or what have you, that would prohibit vehicles from actually parking on one side of the river. It would be blocked off altogether. So that would remove any possibilities of pedestrians wanting to cross back and forth. The likely location for that type of restriction would be on the north side, just given the fact that we have the boat ramp and kind of that larger space where majority of people enter the river on the south side within the easement that Crosswater provided through their land use approval way back when. So it would likely result in blocking off the north side, but certainly the south side could be a part of that consideration. Option two that would address that specific issue of pedestrians crossing would be constructing a median barrier right down the middle of Spring River Road. And for a variety of reasons, we're not too keen on that. Namely, to put that barrier in, you then have to kind of move traffic around it. And of course, when we did the improvements last year, we used every bit of right-of-way that we could possibly use for pavement. And although we did acquire a slope easement and drainage easement from Crosswater, it was kind of communicated to us throughout that they were barely comfortable with that, and that certainly any pavement on their property would be an easement that they would not be probably willing to offer, at least at that time. And so they require widening the road. The second piece is that once you put the median barrier down, now you're boxing kind of traffic in that space, and they don't have the ability to kind of kind of cross the line, if there's, like you do when you see a cyclist on the side of a narrow road, should anything happen on one side, traffic can't move to avoid it, so to speak. So that's an issue, coupled with the fact that to put like a Jersey barrier barricade, we would still need to probably add fencing on top of that, because it's still something that people can physically jump across, and it would eliminate some of the crossing certainly, but not all of it, so to speak.
Well, you don't recommend this.
Don't recommend it. Don't recommend.
That was the last thing I read.
I'm just
Yeah.
envisioning somebody feeling real athletic on a hot summer day. I'm going to go jump that like a pole vaulter or, a steeplechase.
Sure. Yeah, and there's
just see it,
there's
yeah.
the picture of it, provided in the memo. So those are two that kind of addressed specific, that pedestrian crossing Spring River Road issue. Some of the rest of these kind of somewhat address that as well, in addition to general pedestrian safety. So option 3, and this is one I think that's kind of new to the conversation in a little more detail, but if we were to construct wide, accommodating paved paths on each side of Spring River Road, and of course this would require an easement purchase or right-of-way acquisition, and we can talk about we have talked, and we'll talk about some of the complications with that. But if we were to provide that level of path going east-west to where pedestrians are invited to get on that path, then head to the river, coupled with a crosswalk right at the bridge itself, and then installation of what we call a rectangular rapid flash beacon. That's the pedestrian-actuated flashing, blinking signs that light up when a pedestrian wants to cross a road. So collectively, with paths and a crosswalk, could hopefully channelize pedestrians on the outside of the road, make it very accommodating for them. Add signage that would certainly indicate crossing the road is not to be tolerated. But we could at least get them out of the road, moving east-west, and then hopefully crossing at a safer location. So that's one option that may be a little less threatening to the adjacent property owners. We would need probably a 20 to 30 foot easement from them that perhaps they could be willing to dedicate or sell the county, especially given the fact that what we're hearing, the majority of the concerns are coming from those adjacent property owners, and if they would like to help work with us on a solution, I think that's a conversation that we'd like to have with them. So maybe there's an opportunity there that they've been softened up a little bit, that they could perhaps work with us to get that easement.
And this is on each side.
On each side.
Right. So
Yep.
they would both have
Yep.
to come forward.
Yes, yeah, that'd be correct. And I think that's the other thing that we saw a little bit in that meeting several months ago, and certainly, Tom and I have observed in our conversations with them leading up to that. And there's, each one of them would like the problem to be on the other person's property, naturally. And so by sharing this and being equitable on each side, I think that's something, just like we did with the parking. We could have put parking on one side or the other, but it was, important to those adjacent property owners that not one side doesn't share the entire burden. The fourth option, and we're kind of getting back into the original report, and not just the report, but our original conversation with this that we had probably 4 or 5 years ago, was actually purchase property from SROA or Crosswater and actually construct parking lots in their common area. And this would absolutely solve the issue. We'd be taking cars off the road, putting them in a parking lot, be taking pedestrians from out of that road prism, putting them in a path leading to the bridge access areas. Of course, when we broached this subject with them originally, this was Plan A way back when, it was a non-starter, just given the acquisition of the property. And the thought of the county having to exercise eminent domain would probably be the only logistical way this could happen. But it would certainly, I think, be the solution that would address the safety issue associated with pedestrians and Spring River Road conflict.
You don't mention an acreage. How many acres? I mean, is this something where you want to purchase acres or a quarter acre, or what is it you need to actually implement that 267.5 feet
Yeah.
area.
So it's probably an acre of the 10 acres that one of the property owners has in their common area. So it's, it's not a tremendous acquisition when you look at it from the aerial perspective. There'd still be buffer to the homes. There'd still be opportunity to create more buffer to a parking lot. But it's purchasing property that they've provided within their subdivisions for common space, for buffer in and of itself. And it's not a good situation, anytime you have to think about, more heavy-handed options like this, but it's on the table nonetheless. I think, it has to be if access and safety is a part of the conversation.
Chris, Commissioner, I just mentioned, the two designs that are in the report there are just meant as examples, illustrations of possible off-site parking facilities, including on the north side, some kind of a launch facility. So we're not married in any way to those particular designs, but the option really involves, reinitiating discussions with either of the two HOAs to determine if there is some kind of a design that may be acceptable to them, that would include, whatever buffering or screening we could do, and then we'd try and fit, a footprint of a facility within, what they'd be willing to sell or lease, long-term lease to us on either of those sides. So it's just the option is try something again in terms of a facility, not necessarily those two.
When we think of this facility, is there an optimum number of capacity, parking, and throughput? Or, because I'm worried that if we have 50 spaces or 100 spaces, they'll always be used. No matter how big we build it, it'll just look like it's more accessible, so more people are going to schedule their summer around, I'm going to go park in that parking lot on July 4th and go down the river. So it'll go from 50 to 100 to a couple hundred cars, no matter how many parking spots we put.
Right.
Is there any kind of official engineering thought around that? Or?
Not really. It's all dependent on, that activity and its popularity.
Yeah.
I will say that, we're focused on Harper. At the same time, the takeout locations north of Harper, once we start talking about making a significant investment here, I think we have to look at where they're getting out
Yeah,
as well.
Yep.
I know Sun River's raised their hand and said, hey, we're having problems with people getting out trespassing throughout the site, their property, but especially Cardinal Bridge. It's becoming an issue for them this summer. Just simply by observation, last year, when it was, actually 2 years ago, when it was unrestricted, there were reports of over 100 at times. I think the Google Earth image shows 80, just taken randomly.
Yeah.
I think you could
Yep.
build 150
Amazing.
and fill up 150
Yeah,
spots.
yeah.
Given what we saw this summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to think back, though, to 19, and actually, we have a different pressure in today's world because of COVID. And 19, it really did work, I thought, pretty well. We didn't have any of this feedback. I think because this year, it was one of the few things that people could really do. So is it going to swing back to people being a little more understanding, or are we going to have the issues? I mean, because we did cut it back to 50 from the 100 that had been there, on those really hot days.
Yeah. So, and consequently, we've have seen, and as we knew would happen, parking in other locations take place. So Maxwell Bridge, Big River, and the Forest Service facility down there. We had a gentleman kind of give me some information on the busy weekends. They would have 80 vehicles between the parking lot and then parking on both sides of South Century on some of those busy weekends. So more people actually parking at Big River than physically able to park here at Spring River. So it's the popularity of river floating is just growing exponentially. It's a big thing, clearly. So option 5 is one that's been discussed both in the prior reporting and really since this has become an issue, is just loading zones. both with and without shuttle service. So if we were just to block off all parking and just allow those loading zones to function such that, people are having to find their way there either, through private shuttles, through an organized shuttle, through just their own personal use, which takes place quite a bit. People are, shuttling rigs, and, someone sits out that day, and everyone else gets to have the fun, so to speak. So even though we've got 50 parking spaces there, it's serving a lot of users just in those shuttle spaces. So that's an option that, still exists, but I do think that would increase congestion, certainly at the bridge site vehicularly, and with a lot of turnaround movements and things like that. So there's some additional consequences for considering that. Option 6, and I see Dave Doyle probably hovering his mouse over his unmute button when we talk about removing all parking and closing river access at the bridge. So can this be done? Absolutely. Does it come with legal risk? Yes. So Dave will tell you that, generally speaking, the public has the right to access the river. We don't need to facilitate that access, but once we defacilitate it, once we take it away, are we then incurring some risk? And Dave must have been happy with my answer. He just muted himself. So.
Oh, good. So I'm sure he wants to say something.
He'll pipe in, I'm sure. There he is.
Just hit the nail on the head. There is absolutely risk associated with that. Oregon is very strong in access to public waters, and when you take that away or you put up barriers to that, you're inviting challenges. So I would just leave it at that in this context. Certainly in a more private one-on-one context, I could provide a little deeper legal analysis.
Well, I do support that. I mean, public has right of access. I mean, that's a concept. It's a public waterway. This is a bridge. I remember kind of researching this a couple years ago and understanding that, okay, at a bridge crossing, the public has the right to get in the water at that kind of sloped base of the bridge. So, yeah. But yeah, there could be a dicey line if we say, okay, no parking within X amount of feet of this bridge. Somebody could take offense.
Absolutely, and every bridge crossing we have that has any sort of river access where you could put an inner tube in and scoot down the river, we're having the same issue.
So
if you just track it from in Tumalo, both at Twin Bridges and certainly Tumalo Road, very very congested, during the floating season. Finally, option 7, this is the, maintaining status quo and perhaps definitely keeping the recent modifications of the 25 mile per hour speed, emergency speed limit that we could impose seasonally, just like we had to some degree with the 35 before, but this would be 25 in consideration of the amount of congestion that has really occupied that area now more so than in the past. Of course, the bridge jumping ordinance is something we need to bring back to the board to remove the sunset clause for that was placed in that, and then continued focused enforcement. Now, to that, the road department, we could promise to leave variable message signs there all season, that really flash that message of pedestrian activity slow. So we're not just relying on the variable speed and the radar speed feedback sign and a limit, but actually providing, more active signing, just like we did kind of throughout the whole summer. But that was more of a reactionary thing. This is something we could plan on. So that's the nature of the options. Certainly there are other options, and there may be other ideas out there that exist. So that's what we've presented here today, and just kind of looking for your thoughts. I know Commissioner Henderson has a lot to say about this too, and I'm sure he'll want to weigh in on this as well, just given the I know he's been down there a handful of times and shared photos and experience.
I think of it as a seasonal kind of 4 or 5 month issue, maybe not 5 months, 4 months maybe. That's how we would categorize this? Very much seasonal, because nobody else is going to get out in the river from now till next
absolutely.
June or
it
something.
sits there. We and this is why we do a temporary speed limit. it would not function with a 25 there today. There's, one car there for somebody that's carpooling or, something of that nature. It's not used for river access, really, from once school starts in earnest until, it heats up, probably mid-June,
And
So
then,
really, it's 4 months that we're
yeah, it's
really
about 4
worried
months,
about.
yeah.
Yeah.
For school this year that's another question.
Yeah.
And
So-
the temperature is also another question. So, we did have a pretty nice September.
Yeah. Safety is always number one in this scenario, that just the vision of, a young person with a float device that's bigger than them, kind of bouncing around on the road, trying to go from car to river. That's the scenario that's, it's just frightening to think about what might happen. So I think we do have wonderful safety improvements. That green striped lane there is just opens it wide up for a lot more room for the person to drive and the person to walk. So, I mean, the improvements we've done out there have just been amazing with what we've had. Did have resident this year say, really frustrates me and my wife, the two different people driving at different times, knowing that I'm coming in there, I'm slowing down, and it still feels unsafe. But as a resident of southern Deschutes County, a different bridge crossing that I go to at home, I kind of thumbs up and celebrate the fact that people are out and enjoying the weather, and having to roll through a facility like that at 10 or 15 miles an hour just a few days a year when people are just all over the place is a great community feel too. There's a flip side to this. What a wonderful asset in our community to have this natural resource for people to enjoy. That's kind of the thought on speed at this point. Bridge jumping, I know we did put a sunset clause on it. I do feel like we were in the middle of COVID pandemic, making a change that would possibly affect all bridge crossings in the county, and then we brought it back to just that bridge crossing, and we put a sunset date on it. I think that was the right thing to do at that time, because, as I say, we don't even have citizens that can pretty much join us in a room like this. We've had public hearings where, I don't know that this would attract it, but other topics that we have the room, 20, 30, 50, 100 people sometimes on a topic. Hopefully this isn't that big. But, making that choice and putting the sunset date on is kind of prudent during these dynamic times. That code change, is that a topic that Planning Commission could look at, or is that, since it's not land use, it's not really the main?
It's not a
Jumping
land
issue.
use provision. I mean, that you could ask the planning commission to look at anything you want, but it is not part of our land use code.
Yeah, because it's not land use. I'm just thinking the community discussion, because it started off as, if we put this in our code, maybe it's prudent to put it in for all bridge crossings. And I thought, oh, well, that's even a bigger conversation, so I'm not opposed to bringing that back, having that conversation, make sure the community understands we're having that discussion, and just an idea of it, the planning commission. I don't know that they wouldn't really need to do that. I was just kind of thinking that through. And then, for myself personally, as elected official and southern Deschutes County resident, I would not mind showing up and having this discussion at Crosswater, Sun River, and Deschutes River Rec Home Site community meetings. Just their regular meetings. Doesn't need to be a big call for the community meeting. But if one of those organizations wanted to put it on their agenda, I'd be available to have that discussion. Because it's just a rock and a hard place. It's very seasonal. On one hand, it's just wonderful we have this asset. On the other hand, yes, it's impactful for a few months out of the year, and it'll be impactful next month for a few months, or next year and a few months out of next year. But as I say, it doesn't keep me up at night thinking we've got to fix this. It's just something that shows up, gets exciting, and then goes away for 8 months.
Actually, people from Sun River spent hours with me before I was elected with the safety factor of Harper Bridge and how critical it is. And I know I was getting calls this last summer from people on a weekly, almost a couple of times a week basis, seeing kids, jumping, et cetera. And, just one bad jump and, oh my gosh, there goes a child's whole future. Everything has really changed. So I really think the bridge jumping is something that we should definitely bring back. And of all your options, because you don't like that center median idea, because I can understand when you have to move over and everything. I think option 3 is something that we could see if they're willing to go that route. It seems like it's the simplest option at this time, and yet, it's protecting and it's making it really clear. I mean, I love all the painting and everything. I was surprised, though, that, okay, we've got green for Oregon, but where is the black and orange for Oregon State? So if we ever have to repaint, we could do one color on one side, just to be fair.
Asphalt speaks for Oregon State. I'll give us that.
Okay, well, okay, so maybe that's where we have to, we can see our beavers. So, but I don't know, I do like option 3 if they're willing. You can always hope that next year things are going to calm down a bit and people will go back to how successful it was in 19. But I do believe that, do we stay with our modifications that we used this year? But I don't really think they were particularly happy. The community down there wasn't really happy with it. So that's why I would say, well, we could start with option 3, see if we have any traction. We should talk to Commissioner Henderson about it. And then, then we'll know more. But the great news is it is October 14th. So we are starting early. We promised them that we would look at this again, and thank you, Chris, so much for bringing all this information to us today.
You bet.
We can't just sit on it. It was on the county plan, the 2012 plan to be safety. And clearly we did something that did work in 19, but, it definitely 20 needed way more help.
Well, and I want to thank Public Safety, Deschutes Sheriff's Office for making the presence. I think that's the variable that we can plug in and, unplug. It's a staff time, it's presence, it's a vehicle, but that, just having the vision of a vehicle there or somebody standing around, not just standing around, but, making a presence, and or bicycle officer, Sun River, we could have that discussion too. Just having that presence really just calms everything down too. So that's something we can plug in and take out.
It didn't actually. They had to give tickets. They did have to give tickets this year because I think we've had a major lack of civility in our culture, unfortunately. And I know, talking to some of the officers, when they were just like saying, please don't jump, and they were still jumping like right in front of them. So, yeah, no, you really,
Well, it was a thank you
unfortunately,
to the officers.
Yeah, well, no, they were great. Thank you, Sheriff Nelson, for answering that call and that need. And, starting, October 14th on this to resolve what can we do next year, I think is not a day too soon. So hopefully we'll hear from all parties.
Okay, great.
So one question, option 3 was mentioned, is that construct a path separated from the roadway. What about the current improvements? I mean, is there any changes to the current improvements?
No, this would just be a path that would be accessed, on the other side of the vehicles, rather than, kind of walking adjacent to the vehicles on the street side. So it would be wide enough that it would be accommodating. There's issues there with ADA access. I think we'd have to address in one form or fashion. But, those I'm sure can be overcome. But, I would think that would provide a safer route and get the pedestrians out of the road.
Get them away from this, yeah.
So parallel parking.
But it's all about
road,
right of way.
Get to the path to be able to get to where you want to go instead of on the green stripe and the edge of the road.
Correct.
Yep, just making sure we're clear on that. And that kind of, this is this memo is available to anybody who wants to look at it. And that fits right in with the discussion that I was offering, any of these boards that want to have this discussion, I'd be available and we could have these discussions.
Right.
So, Commissioners, I think that would be critical for option number 3, as Chris said.
Right away.
We aren't able to do this just by deciding to do it. We will need the cooperation of the adjacent HOAs to grant us the ability to do that through, again, either a sale or a lease or an easement of some kind to be able to do that on their land. And as you know, as we've talked about, a number of times, I don't expect that's going to be a wildly popular option with them. So we could certainly use the commissioner's help in, some kind of a facilitated discussion in a joint meeting, a scheduled joint meeting, or just, asking them to put it on one of their meeting agendas for, commissioners and staff to come to sort of make the pitch, if you will. So I think that would be a critical piece of option number 3, is to begin those discussions, and we can start now and sort of exploring with them when that could occur. James, as you heard, and Lewis, the SROA general manager, certainly committed to further discussion, and particularly with SROA, there may be other items that are of mutual interest that we could also talk about at those. So we'd be happy to, either schedule a joint meeting or set something up for one of those meetings, and we could do the same thing with Crosswater, if you like, to again have that discussion. DRRH is more impacted by the overflow parking than the actual trespassing issues or safety that are associated with the other two. But if you like, just to include them in the discussion to talk about options, we could do that as well. So just in terms of kind of seeking specific direction from you on next steps, if that sounds amenable, we can begin those discussions and try and set something up.
Well, it's to me, it's a perfect time to ask them, is this something you would consider? Because if they say absolutely no way, then okay, then we have to go on to something else. But okay, if we could do it with like 20 feet, you're saying 20 feet possibly on each side. I mean, just to keep everybody as safe as possible. Those 4-year-olds that are going to like run down, and cross the street and everything. How to keep a 4-year-old safe? It's really, takes a lot of people.
Yeah, I remember.
So anyway, thank you so much, Chris.
So, I mean, I'm kind of between how formal do we want to make this, as in a joint meeting with SROA is probably very tangible, as in there's other topics. I'd love to, meet with their board, because they have quite a board, and then take it from there. So that'd probably be the first action item, is Sun River Owners Association, joint meeting, and then go from there, as I say, if Crosswater and DRRH, either they're separate meetings or they could attend this, or, just as community members in the vicinity or whatever. But yeah, let's do SROA first.
Okay.
Do you agree, Commissioner?
I hate to say one person should be first. I think it's got to be a collaboration between the entire community. So, let everyone know. We would love to talk to them and see who gets back first.
So all 3 organizations?
Well, not that it's probably that's too big of a group, but I just would like to get feedback from all of them. I mean,
I think DRH is there's a road district that there's no, I guess there's homeowners because of the ownership, common ownership.
Yeah, unless they've stopped. I've actually attended a couple of meetings in DRH. As you know, there's like 9 different phases and different HOAs, but the one at the far north, adjacent to Spring River Road, where the clubhouse is, and their park there is the one that I had in mind in terms of the one that would be impacted by have been impacted by the overflow parking, lunar and solar there to date.
Yeah, so if there's an active homeowners association, as I say, I'm thinking back, maybe it's just the road district that kind of acts as, so maybe we need to learn about that. So, but yeah, I'd be available for all 3, Crosswater also.
of course.
Yep.
I think we all would. I think it's really.
We'll try, yeah.
Remember, when things get back to a little more normal, Sun River Resort, it does contribute to 50% of the room tax of Deschutes County. So that's an incredible asset of our county that we need to make sure that everything is moving okay there.
And we've been down this path, though, because there's been a pretty clear, no, we're not going to do any land use access at that intersection. I mean, that's been the message from Sun River. The answer has been no. So we stayed in the right-of-way only in the previous efforts. So as I say, I don't mind having this conversation, but we've asked, and it's been answered. So,
I'll try again.
yep, we'll try again.
That's what I always say. Ask nicer.
Well, I mean, if it's common ground or not.
Okay, thank you, Chris, for joining us. I believe we have Ed Keith on the agenda now, our forester. Ed, are you available?
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
For the record, Ed Keith, County Forester. What we have on the agenda this morning that I'll be addressing is a potential grant opportunity that we would be a partner in. This particular opportunity, we wouldn't actually be strictly an applicant, but there's an opportunity to participate through a program that's offered through what's called the Joint Chiefs Program. And that's offered through the U.S. Forest Service and the Natural Resource Conservation Service to work on what are generally termed all lands issues. So issues that don't tend to respect property boundaries and cross property boundaries or jurisdictions. In this case, the Natural Resource Conservation Service is the lead for private lands, and of course the U.S. Forest Service for the Forest Service lands within this landscape that's been established for this proposal. We are looking at a very small part, being a partner for a very small part of a larger funding package. So the Forest Service and the Natural Resource Conservation Service all totaled are applying for work to be done in a landscape that starts south of Bend, extends west of Bend, north to Sisters, and then all the way up essentially to the Metolius River and the Camp Sherman area to address some of these issues. One of the primary ones is fuel reduction and increasing fire resiliency. There are some other components of the project, but that's where our main focus would be for our portion of the funding would be smaller landowners within developed communities, offering them some potential incentive funding for creation of defensible space. So this is potential dollars in this proposal, should it be, would it move forward and be potentially approved at the turn of the new year, would be approximately $140,000 for Deschutes County to enable defensible space in those developed communities. The total package for this project is just over $13 million, with the majority of that going to Forest Service lands. They are the majority land manager in the landscape, and so they are proposing to do about $10 million of work across about 54,000 acres in this landscape. A lot of those projects are already ready for funding. They've gone through the NEPA process. There's a couple other projects in the planning process right now. And then the Natural Resource Conservation Service is the other main player. They're proposing to do approximately $3 million worth of work on private lands across about 14,000 acres. Other partners in this project include the Deschutes Soil and Water Conservation District and the Oregon Department of Forestry that would also be working with some of the larger forest landowners that are in this landscape. So the question before you today is that since this is asking for grant funding, even though we aren't technically the applicant, we would be listed as a potential partner to receive some funding to be partnering in this effort to reduce fire risk and address other natural resource issues in this landscape. Be happy to answer any questions or take any comments on this potential project.
So Ed, is the 140,000, is that divided by 3 for the 3-year award period? Or can we get it all in the first year?
I've asked for it to be included in the first year. So a little more background is that we actually had some experience in being included in one of these projects in the past that was starting where this project leaves off in the south and extending actually into Klamath County. We had a Greater Lapine project that was funded and is now essentially complete. There was a little bit of delay in getting the funding because it came in every year, depended on agency budgets and that sort of thing. So I actually requested that we receive this money up front so that we wouldn't experience those delays should we be funded through this project.
I know, I was thinking about that when I drove to Gilchrist a week ago to meet the new owners of the mill. And, you know, how excellent it looks when you drive down 97, how they've cleared it on both sides. Was that the project then that did that?
A lot of the work that you see along that Highway 97 corridor and around the communities in the Greater Lapine area, what was funded through that through this same program. It was a different application. We probably submitted that about 5 years ago now.
Anyway, it definitely looks like it's in much better shape. So I'm sorry we aren't getting more than 140,000. I'm sure we could use more.
Yeah. It mainly has to do with the fact that NRCS can fund the larger land ownerships through their direct funding, and so this was they're not as well suited to work with the really small landowners in the developments where we might be looking at half an acre to an acre or something like that. So we won't be working with the largest amount of acres, but there will be other funding for private landowners. So the Oregon Department of Forestry is potentially partnering to receive another $300,000 for private lands, and then the Natural Resource Conservation Service would have the bulk of the funding for private landowners at somewhere around $3 million.
Great. That's good to hear.
So Ed, one question, where do these projects start to get defined? As in, when it's a Joint Chiefs project, is this the agency, the federal agencies coming together to say, okay, what's the next project? And then they put a kind of a perimeter around an area. So yeah, where does this kind of stuff start?
We actually, the Natural Resource Conservation Service actually has an annual meeting where they look for partners to come and inform where they should be focusing their efforts. And so this was actually at the conclusion a year or so ago of the Lapine project in Greater Lapine, looking for where's our next best move, particularly for where private landowners are willing to do some of this work. And there were a fair amount of landowners that were actually interested in this, both fuel reduction and some prescribed fire in the land, west of Bend. There was a fair amount of interest by landowners that teamed up well with some of the available acres that the Forest Service had. So it's been talked about for probably close to 12 months between those two agencies and then other partners, including myself, Soil and Water Conservation District, and Oregon Department of Forestry, of where we have the landowner interest on the private land side and where we have available acres that are already through the planning process on the Forest Service side. And this seemed to be a good landscape to pair both of those up, being that this is a program that you really have to show participation on both sides. You have to have a private land component and a federal land component.
Great.
And this seemed to be the obvious landscape where both of those could move forward with the help of some funding.
Is this a part of a pool of projects in the West or anything like that, as in other Joint Chiefs projects?
It will be. So that the process from here would be that this would be considered at the statewide level through both agencies, the Natural Resource Conservation Service and the U.S. Forest Service. They typically then move forward one or two projects to the national level. So there's a couple hurdles to jump. You have to really come out on top from a prioritization standpoint on a more local scale or statewide scale. And then those have to compete nationally. I believe, just off the top of my head, that maybe a dozen plus or minus a couple got funded last year. And so they are ranked at a national scale. Luckily or unluckily for us, this this project does include, the Forest Service has a ranking of what they call fire sheds. So areas where the fuels are abundant and they intermix with communities. So the area around Sisters and west of Bend is the actual #1 priority fire shed for the U.S. Forest Service in terms of priority for treatment. So that could help us in funding this work due to the need to reduce the risks of the communities that are involved in the landscape of this project.
Do you know if they've made a decision on next year? Remember this year, they actually, our region voted not to have any prescribed burns. Has that gone out for 2021? Has that decision been made?
I believe it has. I haven't. I believe they're tiering that. My understanding in Oregon to the stage that communities are in or counties are in for COVID, and so if communities are on the watch list or in stage 1, I think prescribed burning is being discouraged. But if you're in phase 2 or above, they are encouraging prescribed fire to move forward. I have seen some news from the Deschutes National Forest that the Sisters Ranger District is looking at a couple prescribed burns here in our kind of narrow window of time, even this fall. So I don't think there's going to be an outright ban like there was in the spring for an abundance of caution to not burn. And I think they're looking at it more strategically and trying to be sensitive in areas where COVID is causing counties to be on the watch list, but in other areas recognizing that we do need this work to move forward for other risks that are posed to the community in terms of some of the things that we've seen unfold over the last 6 weeks or so, and wildfire risk to communities.
Well, when you consider our 8 days of the air quality where we were in maroon every day, I can't imagine that the prescribed burns put us up in the 300s plus. Now, Administrator Anderson told me that Black Butte actually was in the 1,000 of their air quality. I know mine was in 600 a couple times where we are in Sisters. So I'm just thinking, like, I will pay way more attention when we do have prescribed burns to see, okay, where is that number at? Because 8 days of what we dealt with was unbelievable.
It should be relatively rare to go over, 100 on the AQI scale.
Really, 100. Okay.
Those, and just for folks that are watching, those burns are each day. The state issues a weather forecast, and you're required to comply with that weather forecast in terms of not impacting communities with direct smoke. So it'd be more drift smoke or smoke that settles in overnight. If weather patterns are going to push a smoke column right toward the community, that burn is probably not going to be planned on that particular day. And so luckily with prescribed fire, we get to choose the date that we ignite those so that we can take advantage of the best wind conditions and not impact communities anywhere near what wildfires are, but acknowledging there might be a more minimal impact to some of those surrounding areas.
Thank you.
Great discussion. And with that, I'll move approval of Deschutes County being included in the grant application for the Basins to Buttes All Lands project.
And I will second that motion. Further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you, Ed, for all that information this morning.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking for those funds early. Appreciate it. Okay, I believe we need to have Holly Harris now. Oh my gosh, and it's like right on the time. How did that happen? Is she not here? 10:55.
George, do you know if Holly is available for her item?
I knew she was planning on attending. I'll mute and I'll call her quickly and see what's going on.
She may be in the other room. Here she is.
In person.
That's, we heard that. We were right on time.
Here, I've got something for you before you start it here.
And Commissioner Henderson isn't with us today, but I'm sure he will be looking forward to your feedback, your update. What are we dealing with?
I could take up one for Sharon and Phil if you like. That.
Holly Harris, Program Manager with Behavioral Health. Thanks for having me today. Just here today to provide a general update on kind of the statistics. These are the most current up-to-date statistics that we have related to the Stabilization Center. And just as a reminder, we opened June 1st, so this is through October 12th. I have to say I'm pleased overall with the volume that we've been seeing. A bit surprised at how quickly it took off. But we've had 464 visits, and we've had 325 unique individuals. So that's great. We want to continue to see that. We want repeat customers. We want them to come back to us time and time again, so that they are not utilizing our emergency department as much as they had been previously. So it's been a little kind of tricky to do an average per day because our hours have changed each month, and the days of the week that we're operational have changed, and they're about to change again as we go 24/7. So I did some kind of just rough calculations per month, and we're averaging about 5 to 6 people a day, which is, I think, really great, significantly more than when we were at the Courtney building. So I think having our own space to provide this work that's more conducive to people in a crisis has been appreciated by our community members, and they seem to be coming to us more often. So you see kind of the general statistics there of the numbers of people that we have been brought in by law enforcement, the number of people diverted from the emergency department, and the number of people who've utilized our respite facility, the number of people referred by our emergency department, the number of children and the number of adults, and then I'll talk about the number seen by our case manager and why that matters. But just kind of some percentages that go with that. We're averaging about 20% of the people that we see at the Stabilization Center have been diverted from the emergency department. So I actually think that number is probably lower than what we're really diverting. And the reason I say that is because it's kind of difficult to track what hasn't happened, you know? And so we're diverting, we're preventing something. So the way we track that number is we ask every individual that comes into the Stabilization Center via our intake process, where would they have gone if we weren't here? And so some are really clear. I would have gone to the hospital. That's an easy one. But there's a whole bunch of people that have no idea what they would have done had we not been there. And they put, I don't know, or they don't answer the question, and who knows what would have happened had they not come to us. Could have had some probably pretty bad outcomes. We also asked law enforcement where they would have gone had we not been here. And so that's where we get those numbers from. We get the numbers from people self-reporting that they would have gone to the hospital. So 20% of people have self-reported that that's where they would have gone if we hadn't been there. 16% of the people we're seeing are being brought in by law enforcement. Of all the people that come to the facility, about 18% of those end up utilizing our respite facility. And I think that's just important for people to know that we aren't just providing respite at the stabilization center. We are, that's a service we offer, and it's really kind of for our more acute population that we serve at the stabilization center. There are lots of people that come to the stabilization center who just really don't know where else to go to get mental health treatment or know how to navigate that process. So they come to us and we help them do that, and then they're in and out within an hour and set up with appointments and go on to be very successful with that treatment. We have 6% that are referred from the emergency department. I anticipate that number continuing to be fairly low, just because once somebody's gone to the emergency department, they probably got some of their needs met. And so to come to the stabilization center immediately after, unless they need the respite unit, doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I think that number will continue to be low. We want to divert them from the emergency department, not have them go there and be referred to us. Our numbers of children, they're going up. And I want to continue to see that number go up significantly. So we'll continue to do a lot of work on advertising for the child population. So we'll be working with the children's system of care to make sure they understand that we're available.
Are you talking under 18 and under, or?
Yep, 18 and under.
18 and under?
Yeah. And so we each month we've seen that number go up just about. And so we're going to continue to hopefully see that number grow. There's still, I think, a little bit of a misconception in the community that we only serve adults, and that's just not the case. We do serve children.
So besides public service messaging, is there anything that you think the Stabilization Center needs to more adequately serve children?
I do. So I think I want to immerse myself in our program more in the children's system of care work that's being done. And there's been a big grant that they received for that. So I'm hoping to tap in to those groups that are already meeting so that we can, be a part of those conversations, remind everybody that we're here to serve children, and hopefully through those different groups that are already in existence, they'll spread the word to children and families that they're serving, that we're available to them.
Great. No, I know we have our behavioral health monthly meeting on this Friday, so it's always good to hear what the Stabilization Center is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we, starting October 19th, we'll be going 24/7, so very, very excited about that. Averaging 5 to 6 per day right now, given that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and there's still, there's still a fair number of people, especially in our older population, our seniors population, that probably don't feel comfortable coming into a building with everything going on right now. And so I think these numbers are really good, and I'm excited to see what 24/7 will bring us.
Well, and I really like, you can extrapolate that we're probably reducing community disturbance for people in need. Getting officer back out real quick, getting people out of emergency facility, just the room itself, getting them somewhere where they can just sit down, decompensate, relax, or terminology, but relax and get some services. I got to imagine that we're really helping the community get rid of some of those acute situations that just happen in the living room or on the front lawn or wherever these are happening. So it's wonderful to have these services, and then keeping eyes on folks that check in on them a week or a couple days later and say, okay, are we going down a path that's positive or not?
That's the key piece that we do, is that follow-up outreach
Yep.
engagement after the crisis intervention that really makes people more successful going forward. And I will also say the benefit to law enforcement and the time that we're saving law enforcement continues to be really huge, a huge deal. We're still averaging 3 minutes or less for law enforcement to bring somebody to us. That's as opposed to the 3 to 4 hours they might wait at an emergency department. So, the value of that. There's cost value, obviously, but then there's also just a public safety value. That's time that law enforcement's now available to serve the public with other needs that might arise.
So what does that scenario look like? You'll get notification before, like somebody's in transit, somebody says, okay, I think we've got a situation where you guys can really plug in and help. So then you're notified before they would arrive.
They do. They give us their great person, and they give us a call ahead of time, give us a name and a date of birth so we can look in the system and be prepared for when they come, which helps us then get them out quicker. And so then when they get to the door and they bring us somebody, we have 5 questions we ask them. And that is just, kind of some data collection stuff we need to kind of prove our concept here. And then just a basic why are you bringing them here? What are you hoping to accomplish? And then they are on their way. And, if we find that really this person needed to go somewhere else other than us, we don't burden law enforcement with having to figure that out. We figure it out. We'll get them where they needed to go if it wasn't us, and we'll help support the person and not put law enforcement in a mental health role.
So, Holly, what if somebody did come to you, but you actually, and your team was working with them and then realized that they really did need to go to the emergency room? How do they then get to the emergency room safely?
Sure. So we have the ability, as you all know, to do what's called the director's custody, which allows us to require law enforcement to involuntarily transport somebody to the emergency department. Our sheriff's office has been amazing in that they've said, say Bend Police Department brings somebody to us and 20, 30 minutes later, this person, it's now evident they need to go to the emergency department. Instead of calling Bend PD back to come get the person, the sheriff's office, because they're so much closer, has said they were willing to transport the individual for us. And so I think that kind of partnership is what helps make this work so well.
That's great.
Have you had any medical transports, from an ambulance?
Oh, yes. Given the volume that we're seeing, and given the acuity that we see at the Stabilization Center, yes, we have had some instances where we've had to transport people involuntarily to the hospital. We've also had some instances where somebody, either have a seizure or a suspected medical complication, chest pains, things like that, that our 911 partners have been incredible, and our EMS partners, and they are over there in very short order and helping us out.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the update. As I say, I'll see you tomorrow morning. It's just a little tour with a friend now, so it's really exciting. So the staffing, I guess, what's the staffing status? Yeah, that's the next thing, right?
The staffing just blows my mind, because
Yeah.
we started here 8 years ago, and we were a team of 6 on the committee. We are, with including my leadership and myself, we're at 37. And so that's just, that's a big growth in a short amount of time, obviously really needed, but it's been an adjustment for all of us. But we already open weekends. We've got all of our night shift staff hired. I'm working hard to try to get to know each and every one of them, spend some time on each shift. And so it's been an adventure.
Yes.
So,
That's a really positive way to look at it, as an adventure.
So, and this, I'd like to learn about this a little bit more. What does a career in stabilization center look like? And then I'm just thinking how much it's relative to the MCAT, the Mobile Crisis Access Team or whatever. That was kind of the same scenario, correct? But now there's a home for it.
Well, no. So, and the mobile crisis team it remains the same. They are still based out of the community. There's a lot of interconnection between the Stabilization Center and the MCAT team. I mean, they're all under the same program umbrella, they do the same work, but just in different places. But MCAT refers people to the Stabilization Center all the time, and Stabilization Center calls MCAT out to go in the community to respond to situations. So we work in tandem. But yeah, in a career in crisis work, I think the real benefit of what we offer at the Stabilization Center is all sorts of disciplines. So you can start off as a peer support specialist, but then maybe kind of work your way up to a case manager. And if you're already a behavioral health specialist too, a master's level clinician, there are so many different roles within our program that we often see our retention helped because they'll stay within the program and they just move different roles and get different types of experiences. So I think it's great.
Yes, definitely retention is good, and experience, and yes, thank you so much for your 8 years of valuable service to Deschutes County.
Thank you. And I would love to come back in January if that works for you guys. And we'll have, a good 6 months under our belt. We'll have 3 months of operating 24/7, 3 or so months. And I think that'll be some really good data.
Commissioner, I have a question, if that's all right.
Yes, of course.
So, Holly, I apologize if you mentioned this earlier. I've been trying to multitask over here, but some information that I think would be very useful, but would be harder to get because it's not necessarily ours. So, of the law enforcement diversions, you know, what does that mean for them in terms of time saved and, you know, getting officers or deputies back out on the street? And same thing with emergency rooms. You know, if we can translate savings to them, community benefit by freeing that space up for others, you know, I would think would be really helpful in telling the story of the benefit of the stabilization center on a community-wide basis, particularly as we, you know, get into ramped up hours and so forth.
You're absolutely correct, and I have been working hard to try to figure out the law enforcement diversion dollars. It's difficult to get because law enforcement, the CAD system doesn't track how long a typical mental health related call, what the average is for law enforcement. So we have anecdotal information around kind of how long it takes to respond to a mental health call out in the community and what we're saving them. I do know it's about like we can take their hourly salary rate and apply that to what we think the average length of call. So I can probably get some estimates on that. I won't have hard data for exactly how long a mental health call costs a law enforcement officer because they don't track it. And same with the ED diversions. I have a general cost of around $1,300 per ED visit. That's not from our local St. Charles Hospital, but kind of a national number that I can apply to the number of ED diversions that we've had. But I think those costs are not the true cost of what we're saving, really, because you have to think about for a person that goes to the emergency department that often gets triggered by the emergency department environment, and then the staffing has to increase to watch that person while they're in the ED, or staff assaults occur because of that. Like, what is the true cost of that to a hospital system? And that's a really tough number to get, but I think if I can start with a basic number, it'd be something.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And also, I would think it goes beyond just dollars also in terms of expanded productive hours for either law enforcement or the emergency room to be able to do more with those hours that they can fill in by not having a person in crisis that they're wrapped up with.
Agreed. And I will work with Chief Grants to try to figure out a way to measure that in a meaningful way for everyone.
Well, just the fact that you have 20% of the calls diverting from the emergency room is really phenomenal because, you know, if you do have, let's say, a different emergency where you could sit there for hours, you know, because there's such a backup. So, you know, to take the pressure off of that system is really critical.
It is, yeah. I'm pleased with these numbers.
Yes, it's excellent. So the 2.4 million from the state seems like, you know, we're going to have some good feedback for them in the next, 2 years?
Right. The grant ends June 30th, 2022. So I am beyond excited to see what amount of data we can collect in that time frame. And honestly, just to get 2 years under our belt of operating the stabilization center, that's just going to feel really good. And I'll just know so much more at that time. Right now, we're still learning so much about what the volume is going to look like, what the staff.
Voy a saber más sobre el volumen de todo esto.
There you go.
So yes, we continue to learn every day that we're there. But so much of what we planned for is actually happening. So that was reassuring that we were on the right path and that we designed the facility to work in the way it was intended.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you, Holly, for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having
In person, we appreciate that.
I always like being in person.
Yes, yes. I know, I told him, I really wanted to hear it because I drive by the stabilization center every morning and I almost remember to look. So,
See how busy it is.
We've actually started training our night shift staff, so we're open. We're just not accepting clients quite yet because they're still in training.
Okay.
But, that will start coming Monday.
okay. Oh, and don't forget to put coffee grounds on the lavender around the front of the building for their acidity. Good. It's probably doing better than mine. I've been,
A lot of sun right there.
oh, I know that, yeah, they love the sun, don't they?
Well, thank you. Good to see you all.
Yes, thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye, Holly. Thank you. Okay, so now it looks like Kyle Collins. Giving us some preparation for a public hearing. There he is.
Good morning, Commissioners. How are you this morning?
We're good. Thank you, Kyle, for joining us.
Of course. Give me 1 second here. So for the record, my name is Kyle Collins, Associate Planner with the Community Development Department. The item I'm bringing before the board today is in association with an upcoming public hearing that's scheduled on the board's agenda for November the 9th, Monday, November the 9th. Just to provide some background and a refresher for the commissioners, that upcoming public hearing is associated with an appeal of a hearings officer decision that originally approved a 10-lot subdivision to the north of the city of Bend. It's kind of right around the Rally Ranch Nature Preserve and Tumalo State Parks area. The applicant appealed that hearings officer approval based on some site plan considerations. But this specific item is in relation to the transcript requirements for the upcoming board public hearing. The Deschutes County Code section 2232.024A requires that the appellants, in this case the applicants as well, provide a complete transcript of any hearing that's appealed from the recorded magnetic tapes that are provided by the Planning Division. But staff points out that subsection D of that same code provision provides an exemption to those requirements, which states that the appeal hearings body, the board in this case, at any time can waive that requirement should the appellant provide a complete transcript for the appeal hearing. The applicants, as of a few weeks ago, Scott and Carolyn Smallwood, have requested specifically that those transcript requirements be waived for the upcoming public hearing on November the 9th. In consideration of several other options that are available for reviewing the evidence and the record that was presented at the initial hearings officer decision. We have full audio and video recordings of that hearing, as well as staff's initial staff report and other recordings within the record. And so there's several opportunities to actually review the evidence, and the applicants / appellants in this case are specifically requesting a waiver of that written transcript requirement in lieu of these other options. That's really the full scope of this, but can take any questions that you might have related to this.
Great.
So we've done this before for other hearings. I know that it is kind of the advent of the technology, being able to get right to the documents and the recorded hearings. So, I mean, I'd be supportive of this request, just confirming.
And I know we've had our
That's
binder
correct.
for quite a while, so thank you for that. And it's completely up to date with up to item 42. Is that August 28th? That's the last document I have in my binder.
I believe that the only thing that is not in the binders at this point is a request from the applicant to actually extend the land use review clock through December 31st. That was done to provide the board additional time to actually hear the item in November and make deliberations after that point.
Okay, right.
But above and beyond that item, everything should be up to date.
Okay, all right, yes, because this one only said to extend it to November 30th, so.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
So how's the decision work? I mean, so are we making two votes today, proposed votes, or one? Just saying the order to hear the appeal is a separate decision.
So the order to hear the appeal, the board has actually already made a decision on that.
Okay,
The
so-
board order.
And yeah, I'm just looking at it, wondering, okay, so we already did do that, good.
Correct. Yeah, so this is just the request to waive the transcript
Yep.
requirements.
Yes, we did that September 9th.
So, yeah, I mean, if, for the business of what we're talking about here, I'll move approval. So I guess maybe I have the wrong order here. Is it 058?
058 should be the transcript requirement order.
Right.
Okay, I'll move approval of, order number 2020-058, waiving transcript requirements.
And as chair, I'll second that. Any further discussion? No? Okay, Commissioner Henderson? Excuse me, where is he? He's not here. Sorry, Commissioner DeBonne. I was
Yes.
thinking like, he should be here too.
Yeah.
'Cause, this will be, it will be on the 14th, is that right? And the chair votes yes. So I guess 2 votes, we can do this. We have it, we're set for the 9th then.
Correct.
So, is there any other, so I've reviewed the application. Do you have any other statements about, the content of the appeal today? Is that where we're going, or is this the business of this?
Not at this point.
Yeah.
So I'll be preparing a staff report that'll be provided to the board a week prior to the hearing, and that should
Yep.
cover any
That'll be there.
outstanding issues.
Good.
Okay.
I think we're all set.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you very much, commissioners. Have a great day.
Okay. So if that means we're doing it the 9th, so we'll get it like November 2nd. Okay, Kyle.
Mhm.
That should be interesting. Okay. All right. So we are ready now, I believe, for our COVID update, just a few minutes early. Nahad, are you available?
Hello.
Yes.
Yes. Good morning.
Well, good morning to you all today.
Yeah.
We are. Dr. Fawcett just walked in, so let me see if I can share my screen quickly. Wonderful. All right. I'm wondering if we are streaming already. I was told I should probably check and see if we are streaming online.
It appears that we are. Yes, we are.
We are?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So thank you, commissioners, for inviting us. For the record, my name is Nahad Sadrazudi. I'm the Director of Public Health for Deschutes County Health Services. I have with me Dr. Richard Fawcett, our health officer, and Dr. Conway, Director of Health Services, is on Zoom. Many thanks, as always, to Jenny Faith, our epidemiologist, for the great data analysis, and of course to our investigators and contact tracers for collecting quality data that then we're able to use to make informed decisions. Also, as always, I'd like to express my gratitude to all of our health service staff for their dedication, compassion, and meticulous work. So this week's quiz, perhaps Commissioner Adair, if you don't mind, would you kindly let us know or let the community know the prize for this week?
Isn't it great? Yes. Okay. So we have gift certificates, again, from Sisters Coffee and Sisters. So if it will be, I believe, for the first 4 winners. So you need to get on Facebook and answer quickly when you know the correct answer. And there's only one correct answer, correct, Nahad?
Yes, there is only one correct answer on this one. So just a reminder that if the community is watching this presentation on Facebook, please do insert the correct answer in the comment section. So would one of the commissioners, maybe Commissioner DeBonne or Commissioner Henderson, be willing to read this quiz out loud?
Yes, I will. And then another note, today we are being translated and broadcast in Spanish also with a professional translating service, is my understanding. So we're kind of adding to our capacity and capability. So this week's quiz, we are all in this together when it comes to responsibility and disease burden. A, true, or B, partially true?
Thank you. Thank you for reading that out loud.
So is someone,
Okay.
can one of you say that sentence in Spanish? No? Dr. Fawcett, how's your Spanish?
Not very good.
Yeah, I don't think I'll definitely prepare for it next time. I don't have that capacity to offer at this point.
I know, I was thinking that would be great if we do it early enough so that we could actually get it in Spanish and say it in Spanish too. I did have 4 years of Spanish, and 2 of them were at the University of Oregon. Unfortunately, my Spanish is not as good, but I knew I could get my husband to say it in Spanish because he does speak medical Spanish. So.
Oh, great. Yeah, the only thing I remember from my Spanish class is ¿Dónde está biblioteca? So that's the only thing I do remember at this.
You mean, where's the library?
Yes, thank you.
Very good. ¿Dónde está el baño, too? Don't forget that one. Okay. All right, Nahad.
Thank you. Just to remind the community that there are a lot of good data available on deschutes.org/COVID-19. It's a great source for the community to get accurate and timely information about this disease. So some epidemiology data, an update. All right. So this graph is the cumulative numbers, which as of yesterday, Tuesday, October 13, stands at 996 cases and 13 deaths. We do see the rate of change increasing quite a bit after certain holidays, such as Labor Day weekend. Partly what we've seen is driven by movement and traveling and possibly importing and transmitting or circulating this virus in our communities. This next slide shows the number of cases by week. So the week of October 4 through 10, there was unfortunately a 25% increase in new cases. So we went from 68 cases to 85. I was hoping that we had turned the corner last week or the prior week, but it doesn't appear that way. However, this is a new week, and so far we've only had a few cases reported. So I'm hoping that we are turning the corner this week.
And we're also hoping that people are getting their flu shots. So.
Thank you. Yes, an early promotion. I appreciate that, Commissioner.
Yes.
So this is a new slide on COVID-19 cases by ethnicity, and these data are also available on our website. So many thanks to our communications teams. The key message here is that our Hispanic communities are disproportionately impacted by this virus and by COVID-19 disease. The rate of 115 per 10,000 is almost 4-fold higher than the rate we see among non-Hispanic communities. We are working closely with our partners in the community in identifying the drivers and challenges and collectively addressing them in a timely basis.
And I know your health department is really reaching out. We allocated for a Spanish navigator. Is that person now part of your team?
Good question, Commissioner. You're absolutely right that the resource has been identified and supported by the commissioners, and so there's definitely commitment behind bringing on that capacity. I'm not sure exactly where it stands as of this morning, but I'm happy to get that information for you.
Okay, yes, because I do think it's extremely important. I believe our Latinx population is like 8% in Deschutes County, so definitely their impact has been greater. And, I think, the more we can do to educate, I believe that's really critical. So if you can let us know, that would be great, Nahad.
Sure. Noted, Commissioner. Okay, so this next slide, Commissioners, shows the cases broken down by age groups. I'm highlighting 2 age categories here, 10 to 19 and 20 to 29 years old, because we are seeing super spreading patterns among these age groups. What we are learning is that this virus doesn't necessarily jump from one person to another in a linear fashion. Instead, it is spreading more in a cluster way, where around 80% of the cases are generally caused or stem from around 20% of the people. So the drivers that we are seeing in terms of these patterns are both behavioral and occupational. It is about the choices we make in terms of socializing and wearing masks. And it is also about the line of work we're in, which sometimes put us in high exposure settings. Now, this past week, you may kindly recall part one of the story that I shared around a group of teenagers who had parties on regular basis, and there were additional and different guests at each of these parties. The initial case was not forthcoming, unfortunately, with close contact information, and likely didn't share his positive status with other partygoers. Additional cases associated with the parties began to surface. So 2 weeks into the outbreak, and with the cooperation of additional cases and patients, we were able to link 11 positive cases and more than 30 contacts resulting from that initial positive case and social gathering. Now, this is a follow-up to that story, so some of the data have been updated in this slide. During the following week, 2 additional partygoers and 3 household close contacts, parents and friends, tested positive, bringing the total number of confirmed COVID cases to 16. Majority are between the ages of 16 and 19. Moreover, the number of close contacts quarantining has increased to more than 50, and 5 businesses have been affected. And commissioners, I just want to mention something about that, certainly, especially about the businesses as well, because we always say we're all in this together, so it is a shared responsibility, although the disease burden certainly seems to be disproportionately distributed. But in terms of shared responsibility and the choices that we make, the choices we make in terms of gatherings and partying and so on and so forth without wearing masks does have a ripple effect down the line towards even the economic well-being of our communities. So we had businesses, when we say 5 businesses have been affected, for example, one of the businesses had to shut down one of their shifts because they just didn't have enough people anymore to work in that business. And it affects obviously the income and the revenues and so on and so forth. So really just, I want to motivate our brothers and sisters in our communities to be mindful of the choices they make. They don't just affect them. They affect someone else who affects someone else, and then maybe that 3rd or 4th generation affects an elderly person who then unfortunately might succumb to this virus, or a business that might have to shut down and lay off people, and that will affect their livelihoods. Having said that, as much as we want to prevent acquiring this virus, at the same time, there is no shame in getting the virus. If we get it, we need to, the best thing, the most responsible thing we can do is actually be forthright about information and make sure we cooperate with our contact tracers and investigators. And vast majority of people are doing that. I just want to continue to encourage everyone to do that so that we can continue to contain this virus. And I just want to share this visual of the transmission. One of our excellent colleagues, Debbie George, is the one who tries to track the transmission network. And here what we see is really one person and decisions of one person affecting multiple households and businesses. And commissioners, I would say that at this point, it's really, from my perspective, my humble perspective, it's really important that we try to focus on these age groups and try to influence their awareness and knowledge and behaviors with perhaps a mass health communications campaign. And I think we can do this in partnership with various stakeholders in our communities and design evidence-based messages and use various media outlets, billboards, PSAs, social media to increase visibility and build social norms around some of the behaviors that we're expecting from our community members. So I look forward to, as usual, to your guidance on this suggestion.
Well, Nahad, I do notice.
And just to say that, by the way, this is not just a local challenge that we're facing. We are seeing this super spreader phenomena amongst these age groups throughout the country.
I know this morning on the news.
This next slide, Commissioner,
Nahad?
shows how cases are.
Did I interrupt?
And you've heard over and
Can you hear
over,
me?
of course, what's good and what's not so good. Well, the good news is that we do remain below 30% in terms of unknown linkages. So sporadic cases, community acquired or unknown linkages are difficult for us to then investigate and contain. What we want is to understand the linkages and the connections among these cases so that we're able to investigate, interview, and encourage COVID compliance behaviors following identifying the positive cases. So we do remain below 30%, which is great. For October, of course, it's still too early as most cases are still being investigated. So that's just to show what we're seeing in terms of linkages. Vast majority of cases are somehow linked as outbreaks or clusters, especially business associated and other related outbreaks. Household transmission is a big part of where we see case numbers going up. And of course, these social gatherings that I alluded to earlier play a big role in this virus, the behavior of this virus in our community. So I think at this point, I'll pass the baton to Dr. Fawcett.
It's going to go a lot faster if they can't hear us asking a question.
Yes. I know. What's happening that they can't hear us? Have they been able to mute us?
Commissioner, thank you for inviting me. Can you hear me?
Not really well. Dr. Fawcett, could you speak just a teeny bit louder?
See, now he's not going to be sure.
I sent Nahat.
Oh, someone's trying to ask us a question?
We were. I was.
I'm sorry, Commissioner. We didn't hear anything at all.
I know. You've muted me. Okay,
Not
Nahat.
at all. I think our speaker is not very good, so apologies. Go ahead.
No, I just wondered, what about the long-term care facilities? Are the workers at those, are they all tested? Have they been tested more than once? I mean, I'm just checking to make sure that our long-term care facilities are, I'm seeing the numbers are at the, the 30 and under, but are we testing long-term care facilities still?
Yeah, good question, Commissioner. So the protocol for long-term care facilities in terms of routine testing is in place, and I believe they're continuing to test around a quarter of their staff every week so that by the end of the month, they've been able to test everyone. And then when there are outbreaks identified, there is a protocol in place for going in and testing everybody for consecutive weeks to make sure that we no longer have positive cases. And where facilities do have capacity issues, health department steps in to support them temporarily until they can bring in the capacity from their headquarters.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with our speakers, but anyway,
Well,
go ahead.
it's okay. Go ahead, Dr. Fawcett.
Yes, hi, good morning. Can you hear me
Yes.
adequately? Okay,
Yes.
great. And just to quickly add on to what Nahat mentioned, that we do have some small outbreaks in other facilities, mainly amongst caregivers. They're very, very small, and so there's quite a bit of testing at the long-term care facilities ongoing right now. So slide 14, I'm looking again at the age breakdown month to month, focusing a bit on October. We only have, of course, not quite half of the month so far here. But again, we're seeing some increase compared to August in younger age groups being infected with COVID-19. We'll see if that trending continues. And less cases in the elderly, 60 years or older, and also a decrease in the percent of patients with this diagnosis hospitalized. So in some ways, that's encouraging. Next slide. So again, here looking at the numbers of positive cases, as well as the total tests and the total negative tests week to week. This is data that is pertaining to our tests, of course, negative, positive, and so those tests, just as a reminder, are being categorized by the date of collection. Here we have for the past week from October 4th, October 10th, 55 positive tests. That's different than the 80 some odd we just talked about in terms of cases. But there's not, the data isn't all in yet, of course, so we might expect this will rise a little bit just because there's a lag from the time that we found out from the time that the tests were collected. So looking at that last column, our test positivity rate remains quite stable. In fact, it's a little bit better the last 2 weeks. I'm still hoping that we're going to plateau here in terms of our test positivity rate. So we will see how we do in the next couple of weeks.
Dr. Fawcett, I noticed we had over 2,000 tests.
Next slide.
I guess.
This is looking at our school metrics here. And one of the metrics, of course, is to try to achieve, if we can, less than 10 cases per 100,000 population, which is a fairly stringent or difficult goal to achieve. But we have done that before. As you can see back in August, we are still rising a bit here, especially if we look at this in terms of cases. The next slide. This is the other metric here where we really want to stay below 5% test positivity rate.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Is someone trying to ask a question?
No, we've given up. It's okay.
Nothing's coming through. Tom Anderson is kindly sending a text to us saying you're trying to ask a question, but nothing is honestly coming through the speakers and it's working. So please go ahead.
Well, my question was, we had over 2,000 tests 2 weeks ago. I just wondered, is that because the hospital is doing more outpatient or procedures where they need to do testing? Yeah, it jumped. That was the highest we've had is testing. I just wondered where those test numbers came from, if we have any indication.
Correct. Commissioner Deere, I'm not certain. In general, when we have more cases, we tend to do a little more testing. Certainly there are a lot of elective procedures that are going on. I can't say there's more now than there would have been necessarily several weeks ago, although I think in general sometimes people do get their elective surgeries after the summer is over. But we can look into that. I'm not certain why we had that spike there. But the positivity rate was very stable, very much the same.
Yes.
The last 3 weeks, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? I'm sorry, I don't know why we can't hear intermittently, but please, I think Nahad's looking for something on his table when there's a question. So
Yeah,
I appreciate
Tom
it.
is kindly letting me know. So thank you, Tom.
Okay, sorry, I apologize. So again, this is slide 17, right, looking at the test positivity rate, as we mentioned, about 3%, 3.1% last week and this past week, the 4th through the 10th, 3%, so well below the 5% cutoff that we're trying to stay under. Next slide is looking at hospitalizations. This has been stable, actually, the last 3, maybe 4 weeks or more, and so this is encouraging despite this surge or uptick in positive tests in the community. So far, we really are not seeing a sustained rise in hospitalizations. I would say that towards the latter half of September, it was a little bit higher, but not much higher. I think, if I understand correctly, this morning there's a total of 3 patients at St. Charles Bend diagnosed with COVID-19, and 2 of the 3 are Deschutes County residents, and I think nobody on ventilators, as I understand. So that's good.
So before we go to the next slide, I just want to pause and make sure there are no questions since we're having some issues. Are there any questions, please?
No, you answered my question about how many were Deschutes County residents, so I didn't have to ask it. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Sure.
Perfect. Good. We're building a nice rhythm here. So the next slide.
So there was a request from the commissioners last week, I think it was, and I apologize if it was 2 weeks ago, but to have some more information regarding just the basic science around COVID-19. So we wanted to provide that. This is a complicated illness. I'm not a scientist anymore, but I would say as it compares to other viruses, it's probably it will be and probably is going to be maybe now on par with HIV in terms of its complexity in some ways. So I think, as I understand, I looked at, thank you for the email, Commissioner DeBone, that perhaps later on in the month we would have a more detailed discussion. And I think the goal for today was 1 slide. I apologize, there's a little bit more than one slide. It was on my screen, but I think I had a smaller font, so I apologize. So I'll just go through this and maybe leave a little bit of time for questions if that's appropriate, looking carefully to see if there are questions. I wanted to just talk about some of the very basic information. This virus has been named SARS coronavirus 2 or SARS-CoV-2. CoV, little ov, capital V, is kind of the nomenclature for these coronaviruses, especially the respiratory coronaviruses. The ones that are related is, of course, the original SARS that we had, which I guess people call it SARS-CoV-1 in 2003. Then after that, MERS, which is Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, it would be the second of the related respiratory viruses. Now we have SARS-CoV-2. So that stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2. As we know that this was first suspected as an outbreak of undiagnosed pneumonia in Wuhan, China in December of last year. By January, it was determined that the cause of this pneumonia in Wuhan, China was SARS-CoV-2. Then in February, they decided that the disease that's caused by SARS-CoV-2 would be named COVID-19, which stands for Coronavirus Disease 2019. And so taking out some of the letters in coronavirus disease, I've capitalized them there. That's how we come up with COVID-19, in case you're wondering. I've always wondered that myself. So just a little bit on discussions regarding the strain. The original strain is felt to be the wild type strain. The main mutation is at position 614 of the spike protein. So most people refer to the original strain of Wuhan, China as the D strain. That's a D for amino acid aspartate. But fairly quickly, at least by March, most of the circulating strains around the world, especially in Europe, had switched to the G strain. Just basically means that position there at 614 changed from a D to a G, which is a glycine. And this G strain is now the predominant strain worldwide. It is felt to be more contagious. It does not seem, though, to be more lethal or virulent. And some people feel it is actually less lethal, but it does seem to be a little more contagious. As of a month or two ago, the mortality estimates around the world about 0.5 to 1%. That's probably a little bit lower than what it might have been back in March and April. However, it holds true throughout the world that the very elderly are very vulnerable. In some studies, as much as 27% of patients 85 years of age or older die from this disease. Risk factors we're well aware of, but just to reiterate them, that any immune suppression, even I think HIV, but certainly medications that suppress your immune system, diabetes mellitus, obesity, asthma, especially other chronic respiratory conditions, heart disease, especially coronary disease, and hypertension. In terms of the risk for transmission, we talked about this is nothing new. I just would want to reiterate that poorly ventilated, small enclosed spaces are really risks. So think about the cruise ships, the ones that are particularly crowded. And of course, I think in situations where we don't have any encouragement for hand hygiene or face coverings, we see an increase in transmission. We can talk about this more maybe later on in the month, but it does seem that most of the severe complications are related to lung disease, but not always. So what happens in the lung typically is what we call clinically in the hospital is ARDS, or acute respiratory distress syndrome, which is a type of damage of the lung tissue itself, or what we call diffuse alveolar damage. The other thing that we see is that there's quite a bit of clotting going on, even in the lung, sometimes very large clots. And then we even think that in some studies that a number of patients just die because of what we call massive pulmonary emboli. So now they don't even have a chance to really develop damage of the lung. They just have a huge clot to the lung, and then they don't get enough blood to their lung, and they die that way. So that's interesting. This combination of lung damage and clotting is important. Other manifestations clinically that we hear about that are important are arterial clots, not highly common, but certainly seen where that can cause a stroke, sometimes massive strokes, heart dysfunction, especially with more severe infections. Neuropsychiatric syndromes are debated now, but some people with long haul syndrome, for instance, have a kind of a sustained fatigue and probably depression as well. And of course, in children, this multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, it does happen as related directly to COVID-19. So those are some other clinical syndromes we see. I won't belabor this. I would just say that early in the pandemic, for folks that had to be on a ventilator, many of them did die. I think the first couple of months, especially in China and other places, that some studies say 80% of patients who went on a ventilator would die. That's much better now. We know a lot more about how to treat patients when they're severely ill on ventilators. One study towards the end of the summer is about 36% of patients, I think it was in the United States, who go on ventilators die now. So that's a big improvement. There are 3 approved treatments by the FDA for emergency use authorization. You've heard about these treatments. The first being remdesivir, which is an antiviral, which actually blocks viral replication, although it's not a magic bullet by any means. The data suggests that the recovery decreases from 15 to 11 days. And probably we think better to give that early in the course, which may improve its use, its effectiveness even more. Dexamethasone, often used with remdesivir, is often very helpful in patients who are on ventilators or severely ill, decreasing from 41 to 29% mortality of patients on ventilators. And then the convalescent plasma also is felt to be helpful, although the numbers are not yet forthcoming in terms of studies of effectiveness, but it does have an EU. So thank you for the update. I appreciate that. I'll take any questions if you have them.
So just real quick, just taking a step back. So I'm just trying to, bacteria or viral are kind of the 2 paths when you have an infection. Is that correct? Just the highest level?
Well, this is an RNA virus, so it's a virus. No question. Bacteria can be an issue when we have more severe infections, especially viral pneumonia, in that there can be what's called a secondary bacterial infection, which may have been the reason why in Asia they were using azithromycin in combination with hydroxychloroquine. I don't know, but really this is all about just the virus itself, Mr. DeBone.
Yeah.
So no bacterial treatments are being considered.
But I'm referring to a layperson's concept of, the bacteria in a wound could cause a problem, but a viral infection is different. So I'm backing way up here just for community to understand, for the world to understand. So this is a viral infection in the lung. So that's what we're talking about, correct?
Well, right. So it's a viral infection, highly contagious. I think, especially with this G strain, I think we feel this is one of the most contagious viruses we've ever known. On par with measles. Of course, fortunately, we don't have to deal with that so much, but it's a very contagious virus as well. So it's transmitted person to person. We don't know about any environmental reservoirs. So that bacterial infections can be contagious person to person, but often that's via contact. Yeah. This is more droplet spread, or even in some cases aerosolized. So it is something that sort of floats from person to person, I guess you'd say. And that's typical of contagious viral infections, much more than bacterial infections.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I'm just trying to help, a citizen understanding the vision of what we're talking about is a viral infection in your lung. Inhaling and exhaling is where it could be shared. Bacterial infection is touching something and transmitting it on physical touch.
More often than not, true. Right.
Just highest level statements.
Sure, no problem. Most of our most contagious infections throughout history have been viruses in general.
I just wanted you to confirm, you said the mortality is 0.5 to 1%? Was that what you had said?
Right, estimated, right. So 1% at the highest from the studies I was looking at. That it varies widely, though, from what part of the world you're looking at, what time in the pandemic we're talking about. So I don't know how well that data was really averaged, so I'm sure there are other numbers that we can reference. So that was just more of a worldwide average to date.
Okay, and then I have a question. Originally, things keep changing. You can take your bags into a market, and they'll touch them and they'll fill them, and then another market won't let you bring in any bags. You have to use their brand new bags. But what I'm wondering, blowers. Originally, they had said don't use the blowers in the restrooms. That blowing was not what you should be doing. You should be using a paper towel to dry your hands off with. Has that advice by health partners in this process changed at all?
Commissioner, I'm not certain of that. I think we do feel, though, that for enclosed spaces with not very good ventilation, that's a higher risk. So I guess I wouldn't be so comfortable with the blower, but I don't know what's officially being recommended, and I apologize for that.
No, I mean, I just was wondering, I was in Umatilla County in Hermiston, and they had blowers, and, you know, they've been quite a hot spot for COVID, and no one up there seemed to realize that they said to quit using blowers. So I just, you know, I passed on that information. I know we were told, you know, right at the outset, probably in March, that was just one of the things you should do. It's much safer. Be sure and wash your hands for at least 20 seconds and, you know, use a paper towel.
Right. Yeah, no, the important thing, of course, is washing the hands. It's important to dry them, too, but using a paper towel would be safer, I agree.
Well, it's better than your jeans, don't you think?
Yes.
That's what people are doing. So I just, you know, you always, how do we stay safe, right?
Thank you for the update.
Yes.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Just a
Foster.
shout out. My pleasure, yeah. Thank you. On school immunization, there's some opening K through 3, as we know. Want to make sure that we don't forget about other contagious illnesses, and especially the vaccine preventable illnesses. We've had measles exposures and many pertussis cases in Deschutes County, as you're aware. So just a shout out to that.
Thank you, Dr. Fawcett. That was really an excellent clinical update. Really appreciate that. Commissioners, would you like to add anything about school immunization before I go to the next slide?
You know, it's very controversial in Deschutes County. And as I've said in the past, according to what I've been told by our health department, it's 22 vaccinations. And we honestly do not want to bring back things like polio. You know, vaccinations have saved more people in the world over the last, 50 years, I guess I would say. And it's, you know, some people don't even know what happens when you get the mumps or the measles and all those, the secondary problems when you get those kind of childhood diseases, because basically they've been pretty eradicated. So, yes, I'm just hoping that people will get their children vaccinated.
Thank you, Commissioner Dara. It was well said. We highly concur.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's just a good reminder that this COVID pandemic reminds us what life would be like every day if we didn't have vaccines for some of the vaccine preventable diseases. And just what you said, Commissioner, gave me some idea for next week, and just want to give an advance notice to the community that probably I'll be asking something about immunization next week. So if they want to brush up on their immunization history, that would be great. So this having trouble with everything today. Okay, so this next slide is on influenza and the flu vaccine. Unfortunately, Commissioner, we are starting to see positive tests, flu tests in Central Oregon. As you know very well, they're not reportable, so we don't necessarily get accurate numbers. We are just monitoring trends and the reports coming in voluntarily. But it does appear that this virus is starting to circulate in our community. So just to remind everyone that flu vaccines are available. They provide around 40 to 60% protection. So it's definitely better than nothing, and it's a key part of managing flu disease this coming season. All people, of course, with some caveat over 6 months are eligible to get the vaccine. I received the vaccine a few weeks ago, my wife and 2 kids as well. So I hope the rest of the community also considers doing the same. And why get vaccinated? There are multiple reasons. We definitely don't want to overburden the health system in our communities. We would be protecting other people other than ourselves as well, such as the elderly, for example. Both influenza and COVID-19 can cause severe disease, and I think Dr. Fawcett did an excellent job laying out some of the complications and due to the severity of this disease quite well. And of course, I mentioned we don't want to overwhelm our health services, and I'm saying that again because that is really critical piece of wanting to get this vaccine and making sure that we're protecting our community. So in summary, yes.
Nahad, is it still optional for people that work in long-term care facilities to get the flu shot? Is that optional in Oregon?
Well, it's highly recommended. I don't know, say, what the policies are at the different long-term care facilities, but so part of the question I'm assuming is if you're a caregiver at one of the long-term care facilities and you wish to not get the vaccine, certainly if you have contraindications, I imagine you can still work there. But is that the question? I don't know if there's mandates. Right. Most of the long-term care facilities are larger companies now, so they probably have company policies.
Yeah, as far as I know, it's not mandatory. Commissioner, I don't know if St. Charles, for example, mandates their healthcare workers.
I don't think they do.
I don't think they have yet.
They have, yeah. So what I do know, Commissioner, is that some states have decided to mandate flu vaccine this year, given everything else going on. So that's definitely a step some states have taken, especially with some essential workers and in some of the school settings, for example. As far as I know, I don't think it's mandatory in the state of Oregon or in our community, but certainly, as Dr. Fawcett mentioned, there are perhaps company-wide policies related to this. So just to wrap up with some of the key messages here is that despite this crisis and everything else that we're facing, we can never, in my view, compromise our Deschutes values. And we need to remain calm and kind and compassionate throughout this crisis. There is definitely this pattern of 80-20 rule where 80% of the cases seems to be stemming from around 20% of the source. So I think understanding this pattern better helps us maybe be more strategic about the way we target our messaging, as well as perhaps the way we do our investigation and contact tracing. We definitely want to take every measure possible to prevent acquiring this virus and transmitting it to others. And we need to be responsible. If we do acquire it, we should then make sure that we don't expose others and take time during the quarantine period or during isolation and remain out of circulation. Having said that, there is absolutely no shame with catching this virus and developing this disease. It happens, and majority of people recover, although better not to get it so that we don't possibly have to deal with any complications or long-term effects of this virus and disease. Certainly, highly recommend the community to start getting the flu vaccines. They're available in multiple places, including at pharmacies. So there are many access points available, which make it quite convenient for us to go and in a matter of seconds get the flu shot. And it takes a few weeks for it to start kicking in and build that immunity in our body. So best to get it as soon as possible, certainly no later than end of October, so that our bodies are prepared to fight this virus or at least mitigate the disease. And certainly with Halloween coming up, as a parent, I intend to very much help my children experience their first Halloween in the U.S. As you know, we've been stationed overseas for a number of years, so this is really their first opportunity to have this American experience, and I look forward to facilitating it for them in a very COVID-compliant way, in a very safe way for them. So there are ways I think our community should consider in doing the trick-or-treating and other Halloween-related activities in a very safe and healthy way. Some of these recommendations or suggestions are available online easily. People can access them. I'm sure they'll be available on our website soon if they haven't been already. I have heard some. I think vast majority of people are going to make the right decision, and what I'm hearing, it seems like everyone, really vast majority of people will make responsible decisions. I have heard some rumors around parties and things like that related to Halloween, which I really do hope people reconsider, because we do see vast majority of the cases coming from socialization, where people are in close proximity for long duration of time, perhaps often without masks. And that's where the virus starts transmitting rather quickly. As Dr. Fossa said, it's a very contagious virus. So going back to, yes.
Nahad, it does say here, host an outdoor Halloween movie night. Well, it's going to be like freezing tonight, so I'm not quite sure that works in Central Oregon, but it's an idea. If you have a lot of heaters.
Anything outdoor is better than indoor, and I agree with you. I do like to remain warm, so I might reconsider that suggestion. But I've seen others where, like 6 in the morning when I'm walking, I see people in shorts and t-shirt. Meanwhile, I have gloves and hats and the 3 jackets on. So some people apparently enjoy the chilly weather here in Central Oregon. So by all means, maybe this will suit them.
Yes. Okay. So we're to the quiz now?
Yes. Who would like to take a stab at this?
We had 4 people that said A.
And
Anyone
that's
who
what
said
I
B?
would say also true.
Did anyone say B?
I don't know. I was only told about the A's.
Okay, well, the answer is actually B.
B! Oh my gosh, it's B.
Yes, it is true that we are, there is a shared collective responsibility in terms of transmission of this virus in our community, the choices that we make. We're all in it together. We've heard this all the time. We're all in it together. So it's a shared responsibility. However, the disease burden, as the ethnicity breakdown data show, unfortunately demonstrate otherwise. The disease burden is definitely disproportionately affecting some communities compared to others. So in that sense, we're not all in it together from the data that we are seeing. So it's partially true. So whoever said B, and there's definitely no, middle child syndrome here. This is categorically, the answer is partially true. We're in it together. We're responsible, but the disease burden is disproportionately affecting some communities versus others.
Nahad, that was a very interesting question. And we actually have no winners this week. So at least we didn't answer A and B. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, the next quiz, we're going to have to be
we're
going to have to get more winners.
Well, I definitely feel responsible for that, that we didn't have winners, because I should be doing a better job of informing our communities of how this virus and the disease are impacting some of our non-Hispanic community, some of our Hispanic communities and others. So certainly I'll take responsibility for that, for what happened today. Thank you.
No, the question was at the first. I think your information today was really extremely helpful. And I'm just hoping that, we find out about our Spanish navigator and doing, our message on COVID in English and Spanish. I think it's really critical. And it's what we should be doing. So thank you, Nahad. It's definitely not indicative of your lack of caring, because you're an extremely compassionate, caring person, and I'm so glad that you are part of our team. You lead the public health team.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners, for inviting us. On behalf of Dr. Fawcett, Dr. Conway, who contributed greatly to these slides, we appreciate this opportunity to connect with you and the community.
Thank
Go
you.
Bucks.
Okay. Until next time. So thank you very much. We will now adjourn our meeting until we'll have our lunch recess. We will reconvene at 1 p.m. So 1 o'clock. Thank you very much. Okay, good afternoon. We are going to reconvene our Deschutes County Board of County Commissioners. And the first thing on our agenda this afternoon is our CARES Act funding update. Greg Munn, I'm hoping that you are out there somewhere, since you're not in the room.
Magic. It popped
There he is. Hi, Greg.
Hello, Commissioners. Hang on a second here.
Well, hang on.
Go.
Yep.
Afternoon. So for the record, Greg Munn, County CFO. I just have a brief update for you today. So as you recall, last Wednesday during the update, a couple of minor changes made to the allocation, and the amount of funds that were allocated equaled the amount of funds that were obligated to us. So at this point, our uncommitted balance is 0 still after last week. We continue to get updates from some of the contracts that have been funded underneath these allocations, and am also receiving additional funding requests, but I'm holding those in pending right now until we have some sign of funds being released or unspent. And at that point, I'll bring that back to you. But I just want to let you know, nothing much has changed since last week. I do expect us to file another reimbursement request. The last one we filed was August 7th. So we'll be filing another one within the next couple of weeks. We've actually brought on some additional help in the finance department to help us do this. The work is quite extensive, as we have to reach out to all the county departments and have that information submitted to us. So other than that, that's just a short update I wanted to give you, and just to let you know that to expect some more information and changes in the next couple of weeks.
Greg, I heard a different day on a call, on our 7 a.m. call on Tuesday. They haven't moved up that 12:30 date, have they, the state, that everything has to be spent by?
I have not heard that.
Okay, all right. I'm not.
And that's not dictated by the state. That's the federal.
Well, the federals dictate. Okay, but the state hasn't changed any of their rules then.
No.
Okay,
Not
good.
that I'm aware of.
Okay, excellent. So, what about the navigator, the Spanish navigator the health department was going to hire? Nahad wasn't really sure if that person was already on board or not.
I don't have an answer to that, but I can certainly find out.
Okay. Well, the good news was today our COVID update did have a Spanish interpreter on for the entire presentation. So thank you, Whitney,
Actually,
for
I heard
implementing
a
that.
little bit of that today.
So great news.
So the other thing, probably for Tom and Greg, is AOC is working through the process of, does public health have what they need, CARES Act funding to get to the end of the year? It's kind of one of those times to take a look, because that's the primary service of, public health management, contact tracing, and all the big picture items. So it was an ask from AOC to me. I talked to one of the policy people. Are there any disconnects to get to the end of the year with the current CARES Act funding?
Do you
we
mean
need
in
more?
terms of being able to spend our allocation?
Well, either way. Some counties, I don't know, it could go either way. Either we've committed to and we're going to get, where we need to be, or we sure could use some more resources because, whichever. What's the message from Deschutes County if that question is asked?
Well, as you may recall, AOC coordinated an ask about a month ago, I think, 6 weeks ago, on our needs, through the end of the year. And we made a submission with, an ask or a need, express need of substantially more than the $6.5 million that we were originally allocated. We included everything that we had been contemplating as part of your original allocation exercise to decide what was to be spent. So we clearly, I think, made the case that we could use a lot more than the original $6.5 million allocation. I haven't heard
So
anything.
just, yeah, in public health, is there specific asks in public health?
Okay,
right?
well, we'll absolutely follow up and see if we can get.
Yeah, so that's kind of the question. And it's probably very much just like what we're doing here right now, kind of just looking at the same, at the numbers as time goes on, making sure we're optimizing the investments, committing to spend what we committed to, so it's probably the same scenario. But yeah, so the ask was for public health. And it was just a question.
Okay, Greg, so we'll have you on the agenda then next Wednesday, just to keep on top of this, because there isn't that much time left, is there?
That's right. I'm planning to be on the agenda every Wednesday, whether it's a 2-minute update like today or something more lengthy.
Yeah, because something could happen any week, yep.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Great, you bet. Thank you.
Have a great afternoon. I believe we need Peter Russell now. Senior Transportation Specialist.
Yeah, resume and his name there.
Specialist now?
Well, I think so. I think that sounds pretty good.
Okay, I'll take it. Well, good afternoon, Board. Why I'm here before you today is, as you're aware, the county applied for and was successful in getting a grant from the Oregon Department of Transportation, the Department of Land Conservation and Development in their growth management program. There we are. I've now hit all my buttons. For a $75,000 grant to update the Tumalo Community Plan and also to implement the Sisters Vision Action Plan for the rural trails that would occur on county lands. Both our own policies and TGM would, always require us to kind of check in with the various bodies that supervise. So I'm here to make sure that the board is still all right with us accepting the grant. I have a form I have to return to the state by October 30th, which basically names me as the project manager and that the county accepts the grant. And from there, we'll move towards developing a scope of work, coordination with ODOT's Region 4 TGM personnel. So that's my pitch at the moment, to make sure the board is still on board with us accepting this grant.
Great. Being happy to hear that the Sisters Country Vision and also the other part of it, the Tumalo upgrade, the community plan, 2 communities that I'm in on a daily basis. I do appreciate this. So we'll see. How soon will the work be able to be implemented then?
So the grant is a 24-month grant. We can always finish it sooner than 24 months, but essentially we will get a scope of work that'll be acceptable both to us and the ODOT Region 4 office. Then it goes over the hill to Salem to go through a Department of Justice review. I have no control over how long that will take. And then once DOJ gets the approval, then we put it out, request for proposal, hire a consultant, and then we start the work in earnest. So it has to be done. I think they have a completion date of like 2023, but I think we can beat that.
Great.
So a couple questions real quick. So Tumalo Community Plan it's a standalone kind of a comprehensive vision plan. Is it officially part of the comp plan of Deschutes County?
Correct. It's an appendix to our comprehensive plan. We have one for South County, which is called the Newberry Country Plan. We have one for Terrebonne, which is the Terrebonne Community Plan, and we have one for Tumalo. So yes, it's a subset of the comprehensive plan overall.
And is it the greater Tumalo area, or is it the footprint of the original Tumalo plat?
It's what is zoned Tumalo in our unincorporated community definition in DCC. So it's a little more than what the original plat is. There's some rural lots to the west of Tumalo that are in it, some to the east, a little bit to the south. So it's mostly the Laidlaw, but it's not just Laidlaw. So it is bigger than the original town plat.
And there is already one of these community plans, so it's an update to the existing appendix.
Correct. We have the 3 already that I mentioned. So this is an update of the Tumalo one.
Yep.
Great.
Great. Well, and then, for the Sisters Country Vision Action Plan, is that, this is just going to be like, a standalone document for that community, or is that part of our comp plan also at all?
Okay, so that's a great question. So where we'll go with this one, again, it's just for the rural lands that are outside Sisters. So to refresh everyone, the Sisters Country planning exercise was essentially based on the attendance boundaries for the Sisters School District, which has roughly 10,000 residents in it. So what we'll do with the Sisters Country Vision Action Implementation Plan, which is a long mouthful, I admit, is we have to amend our transportation system plan to identify any trails or policies that relate to that. They, in the Sisters Country Vision Plan, they wanted to really stress how to get to Sisters via ways other than driving. So they wanted some community connection from Bend and Redmond, but also they wanted to have some trails portions for the rural lands that are outside Sisters. So for that, the rural lands, a lot of it will require ultimately approval from the Forest Service. So we would coordinate some with the Forest Service about, hey, we're planning on putting these on our TSP map. We don't have jurisdiction on these lands, but this is roughly where we want to put them. And then obviously there'll be a federal process that'll have to go through later on for environmental clearances. So
it'll be
it will result in modifying our TSP.
An appendix of our TSP basically then.
So in our TSP, which we're getting ready to update as well, we have sections for various modes. So there's a vehicle section, there's a bike ped section, there's one on airplanes, because these are all required by the Department of Land Conservation and Development. So where I foresee the work that we do for these Sisters Rural Trails will go into the bike ped section of our TSP, and we'll have some language in there explaining it and any relevant goals and policies. And that, of course, to amend our TSP when the grant's done, we turn around and go through the Planning Commission and ultimately it's the board because it's a plan amendment.
Great. Thank
So
you very
Peter,
much.
does that mean I can ride my horse on those trails? Are these bike?
Remains to be seen. So the Sisters Country Vision did include equestrian trails in their description. I don't know if it's a shared trail or it's like in some places where you have a trail for bikes versus a trail for horses, because sometimes they don't play well together.
That's true. Okay.
If the forest is open enough, you can pretty much just go wherever you want too.
Yes. So, all right. So do we have a motion then?
So I'll move to accept the $75,000 grant from ODOT and DLCD for Transportation Growth Management Program and the two projects named.
And I will second the motion as the chair. Any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. And thank you, Peter. Look forward to getting the approval from the Department of Justice then. If that's part
Don't we
of the
all?
step. Yes. So let's hope that that happens and we can, yes, implement this, action in sooner than later. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, it looks like we have our discretionary grant review coming up. Is Laura available in person, or is she going to be on Zoom? Okay.
She's in the building though. I just saw her.
Hi, Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hello. For the record, Laura Skundrick, Administrative Analyst, and I'm here for our Q2 discretionary grant review. So just as some background, each quarter the Board of Commissioners reviews applications submitted to the discretionary grant program and makes awards. So today we are discussing applications submitted for the second quarter of fiscal year 2021. So you were given binders that included the application materials, which we can just start going through if you'd like, and I can bring up our worksheet to work through.
Great, that'd be lovely.
Okay. Let's see. All right, here is our lovely worksheet. So we can start with Bend Next, which is a program of the Bend Chamber. They are requesting $1,800 for their Leadership Bend program, which is a 9-month community program that connects committed citizens to leadership roles in the community through education and training. And these funds would help provide us student scholarships for that program.
So, Bend Next is a nonprofit, correct? That's what the
Yes.
501c3.
Leadership Bend Foundation. Just because I noticed that the one-time Child Care Accelerator Program dollars went through there too. And just the name of the organization. But I'm supportive. Leadership Bend, we find community members that are proud of this credential, a year or two later, and they use it. But it is valuable to get to know the districts, the services, the scope of the budgets, have some relationships, with all the folks that Leadership Bend will connect them to. So, and we get to present and make those relationships ourselves. So I'll support a third of it, if we want to call it like that, or however.
Okay, so Laura, I have a question.
Yes.
Their 1997 document here of their IRS ruling says, we have further determined you're not a private foundation with the meaning of Section 509A of the code, but you are an organization described in 509A2. So this doesn't say they're 501c3.
I believe in the first paragraph, it determines they are exempt from federal income tax under Section 501A as an organization described in Section 501c3.
But then they say, after that one, they say, but we further determined. So why are they going beyond?
That, I am happy to look into that. I don't know.
We should
the
ask
answer.
Dave about that, because that seems kind of, I don't know, unusual, I guess?
Sure, I can send that to Dave.
Okay.
And follow up.
I know, because it is kind of interesting. Okay. All right, so you said you were going to do a third? Okay. I'll wait to hear from Dave on that one for me.
Okay.
Talks about their 1984 history. Where did I just see that? Yeah, as of January 1984, you are liable for taxes. And this is a 97 letter. So yeah, there's some good history there, is my point, long term.
There's a lot of history, so, okay. All right.
Okay. So next up is the Central Oregon Veterans Ranch, which is a working farm where they bring together different generations of veterans in a natural setting to promote the healing of combat trauma. So they are requesting $2,500 for the winterization of their ranch, which will allow them to hold their winter programs, allow the support of veterans caring for the animals through the winter, and protect their ranch throughout the season.
And I want to comment that you could buy lettuce from their ranch at I believe it was at Newport Market. It was phenomenal lettuce a couple of months ago, because I tried to buy it on many, whenever it was available. Anyway, it was like great. Oh my gosh, nothing like shopping local and supporting the veterans group. So
that's great.
I know. I thought it was pretty amazing, and it was delicious lettuce. So I'm happy to do 1,000 there.
1,000.
And I'll do 500.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so City Club of Central Oregon is our next request. They are a civic affairs organization that promotes active citizenship to build a stronger community. And this election season, they are holding 10 candidate forums. So they're requesting $300 to support those.
So I'm happy to do the 300.
Well, 300. Okay.
So you want to do the whole thing, you're saying?
Oh, I can. Did you want to split it?
I'll do 100.
You'll do 100. Okay, so I'll do 2.
Right.
Take it away from me.
Well, since Commissioner Henderson is like,
Running
he's
for office.
enjoying this, we will fund it for him.
I see.
We will help with their project, with their forums. Okay, good.
So next up, we have Council on Aging, which is focused on the well-being of older adults. They support them and provide resources with programs like Meals on Wheels, caregiver support, and Medicare counseling. They did ask to submit 2 applications, as both are somewhat time sensitive for them, but they did prioritize their requests. So we'll start with their first priority. It's for $2,500, and it is for making important safety improvements at 2 of their locations. So in one location at their Greenwood offices, they have a crumbling concrete walkway that needs to be replaced. as that is what their clients use to access them. And then at a second location on 5th Street, they have an HVAC system that continues to be vandalized and tampered with, and they continue to have to pay maintenance repairs on that. So they would build a fence and a locked gate with these funds.
So I'm happy to do 800 on that one.
And I'll do 1,000.
800 and 1,000. Okay, thank you. Their second priority is a request for $2,416, which would provide 2 canopies for protection during outdoor meal services during their outreach events. So when volunteers are handing out grab-and-go material or meals at their Bend site, activities such as an art pilot project they're currently running, and other events around the county like barbecues and holiday parties.
We're not supposed to have holiday parties, remember?
In a normal year.
I know, it's like we are supposed to have Halloween.
The canopies will be able to use for multiple years. I'll do 800.
800.
Okay, I want to wait on this one because I just think there's a lot of people that need, and it is their second priority, so.
Sure. Okay. So next is the Guardian Group. They provide education and training for identifying sex trafficking predators and potential victims. They are requesting $1,500 to help increase their capacity for online trainings due to COVID. They've had to go completely virtual with their trainings. So they train parents, caregivers, healthcare workers, educators, and law enforcement across Deschutes County. And they're also working with a local video production company who is donating in-kind services to help them with this project.
So I'm happy to do 500.
Okay.
I'm going to stand by on this one, but I'd be interested in talking to them.
Okay.
And you can let them know that.
All right, so next up is the Lapine Chamber Community Foundation, who supports the community of Lapine with fundraising. They're requesting $2,500 for their knapweed removal project. So they're educating community members about the weeds and providing bags for them to collect the weeds, and then providing drop-off locations for disposal of those bags. So this will clear those noxious weeds and knapweeds around the community, and the funds would help to pay for the disposal of those collected bags.
This sounds like something my mother would totally approve of. She really does. She hates noxious weeds, and I'm always pulling them at my house. So I have some really special ones out there. Yeah, I'm happy to see they're going to do this.
Our road department, or
Right.
Have we done the disposal in the past? I don't know that the chamber's ever had to do the disposal. You know,
I did ask to see if somebody else could pick this up, if there was ever any funding, and like the noxious weed department. I think the answer was we didn't have any funding at this moment for it.
Well, so we deal with noxious weeds in 2 different departments. There's the program and road that takes care of the right-of-way. Ed Keith, through the Natural Resources Program, also works with mostly private property owners, although I think he's worked, if not with this group, others in Lapine. I know Commissioner DeBone, I think you delivered some bags down there at one point to not a group that was doing this work. So our solid waste program often accepts certain kinds of weight for a nonprofit group, of waste rather, for nonprofit groups. So I don't want to speak for Tim, but I'm going to guess there's a pretty good chance that he'd be willing to work with certainly a nonprofit for a community-based effort to clean up the community. And also, as you know, and this is flammable material, so there's also the fire-free event, although that's half price, coming up, where possibly we could do it as part of that. So yes, there's potentially other ways to help this effort besides a discretionary grant.
so my thought is to this is kind of a new effort that we've done in the past, but not through this path. So I would rather see this as an application for next year with a little bit bigger vision on what's going on. And then also, so there are yellow bags at that transfer station in the city of La Pine right now, or at the transit station. I mean, I would support that either we go through, ed or solid waste, and if they need resources, that we could provide it, but not hand it over to the chamber right now. But, make sure that those bags are removed, and that's a truckload. There's quite a few bags there right now. It's been a great community effort, and the yellow bags have been provided by the county also. So, and then if this is the right thing to do, let's do it next year. And it was the application, I don't know when the application came in, I guess.
September 1st is what it's dated.
But the project was from August 1st, so yeah, as I say.
Yes.
And now we are, so yeah, as I say, just more of a conversation around this project.
And I'm actually happy to donate $500. I can't believe when people don't clean up their weeds.
Well, so as I say, so $500 goes to the community foundation called the La Pine Chamber Community Foundation.
Right.
Is that for the disposal?
Right, it's for the disposal. The grant will help pay for the collected bags to be disposed of. They think it's going to cost actually $4,500, and they're asking for matching funds from the city of La Pine.
Yeah, I think it's a minimal cost. 500 is probably too much too, if it's truly just moving the bags. So that's why I'd like to
The
understand.
loader
more.
to load the bags, fuel operator loads on the truck, and half a ton per trip with an expected amount of 3.5 tons to move to the transfer station. So, I don't know.
But yeah, I mean,
I'm
that's
happy
fine.
to do 500.
Yep, that's good. And I'm
It's
happy.
in
to have a
honor of my
conversation.
mother. It's her birthday next week, so she would
Oh,
approve.
Yep.
She would approve.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Okay, next is the La Pine Community Kitchen. They serve the people of La Pine 5 days a week with hot meals. They also provide pantry goods 2 days a week and clothing 2 days a week, all free of charge. They have been hit by COVID, specifically by having less volunteers working, but many more people accessing their services, which recently also included fire evacuees. They are requesting $4,590.50 for a new refrigerator for their kitchen to replace the one that just stopped working. This new refrigerator would also increase the ability to store and provide more food and reduce their waste.
So I would like to have a community conversation with the folks that I know down there, because it's wonderful to take the community kitchen and make it bigger and more volume. We do have large freezer and refrigerator capacity at St. Vinny's, only like 3 blocks west of their facility. So we have 2 nonprofits kind of competing for freezer space and food kitchens, and there usually are not 2 of these in a town. And nobody's doing anything wrong. I mean, I'm not upset at either side, but I'm hesitant to put in another whole refrigerator freezer system for a second distribution location in La Pine.
Okay.
I'm letting Commissioner Dare know there's more to the story here. It's wonderful, but man, is it the right thing to be doing?
Well, how long have they been doing 5 meals a week? I thought they were doing it like 3 meals or something, and now the letter says they're doing 5. We're providing hot meals 5 days a week. That's,
See, as I say, I mean, if Neighbor Impact provided food and the community provides food, St. Vinny's is there with large freezer space, there could be a little bit better partnership. And there's a conversation that I would support having in town.
okay, and conversation. Okay. I don't want them to
I'll
feel
take it as an
badly.
action item too. It's time for them, because they're filling this out like, oh, if we just had a big freezer, It's awkward, because they have just a wall full of home refrigerators and freezers, and it costs their electricity a lot. But I think we could align things just a little bit better in town too.
Okay, all right. But I'll think about that one for a minute. I could maybe contribute to the fund for something, but maybe not that refrigerator. Maybe there's something else they really need. So do you want to go on to the Lapine Frontier Days?
Sure. So the Lapine Frontier Days Association supports the Lapine community with many events, such as the 4th of July Frontier Days, the Christmas Craft Bazaar, and the Crab Feed. And they are requesting $2,500 to help clear the debris and burn pile from their event lands, where they hold these large events once they're able to again. So they're getting that land prepared and getting rid of those debris. So these funds would help pay for that disposal.
Gosh, it really seems like we need to get them better landfill rates, don't you think? They're expecting $1,800 in costs at $60 per ton for the landfill. There are, aren't there rates available at some point in time for the community?
Yeah, Commissioners, there are. Tim brings to you each year rates for benevolent organizations. So I'm not sure if the Frontier Days Association is on that list, but if not, they certainly can have that conversation with solid waste to see if there's something that they can do for them. And I'm not sure if they are or are not.
Well, I'll cover the 700, and then maybe we can find out if we can do something about the rates. Is it possible to do that now and not like last January?
So I drove by there recently. There's a lot of wonderful cleanup that's happening. I'm sure there's some truckloads of waste, and it's kind of scalable. If they could remove just a few truckloads, it's going to really help. I don't know that we need to fund this fully, so I'm just thinking I'll match, what did you say, 700?
I said
I'll do
700.
700 also.
Okay, good.
'Cause they'll be happy and be able to do some work with that.
It's such a beautiful site, so I appreciate that they're cleaning it up.
All right, thank you. So next up is REACH. They assist individuals in vulnerable situations towards stability and independence by helping to provide access to critical resources and referrals to local agencies. So they are requesting $2,000 to help support their homeless management information systems. And these funds would help to hire a part-time employee who would enter the data and maintain this system, which collects data and creates individualized service plans, records use of housing and services, and other capabilities.
When they mention homeless management information system, I think we may have that in town. So it's once again, it's like we need to kind of communicate with what need are they filling, and do we not have this capacity in town? Because I know this is exactly what our health department has, the homeless outreach.
Right.
So, I would once again propose maybe stand by and then have a conversation with them too.
She did give a response when I was emailing with Colleen Thomas regarding our homeless, and her estimate of the homeless population in China Hat was 80 to 100. And actually, after visiting China Hat homeless yesterday with Deputy Shane Zook, their numbers, what they have documented, they felt it was a range up to 150 people. So in China Hat. So anyway, I know they're definitely, they're part of they're trying to make a difference. Yeah, it's great when more people work together.
Well, and as I say, it's wonderful, but we would be paying somebody to take data and put it in a system. So it's kind of like I'd like to have a little bit bigger picture about what's the goal, what's the action. So as I say, I'm sure they're intending on doing great things, but we might be able to coordinate a higher level goal just a bit better too.
Well, I'll do 400 just because I do believe that they probably need to be part of the picture, but that's all I can do.
I'm not going to do anything at this time.
All right. Next up, we have the Upper Deschutes River Coalition. They have 3 missions, which are to support fire-adapted communities, to promote clean and abundant river flows, and to enhance beneficial wildlife habitats. So they are requesting $1,500 for support of defensible space, which would help to fund project management, community outreach, and the management of existing funds to create defensible spaces in South Deschutes County. And I did receive their 501c3 form after these materials had been prepared, so I do have that.
Okay, I was wondering, I was looking. Okie dokie. Yeah, all right. So you do have the documentation then?
I do, yes. I'm happy to send it to you if you'd like.
Okay, so I can do 500 for that one.
I'll do 500. She's got the running total up on the wall.
Yeah, she does.
So for fan, I might propose $2,000 instead of $2,500. So, and my thought process is, in the past, it was truly a lunch event in the community getting together. So the overhead was a little more. So if it's going to be virtual events, 2,000 is just seems to be a better number.
Okay, well, if you look at our ending balance from the first quarter, we have 11,880. So that means really we could allocate $3,960 to keep everything pretty, stay within line. So I would say then if we do that, Hospice of Redmond also is really a fundraiser. So if we do 2 for both of them, it's not quite doing them 100%, but it is 2,000 of 2,500.
Right.
And we're still we have to think of, next quarter.
Yep.
But it's,
I'm sure they'd both be very pleased.
well, hopefully they would be. I wish we could do the full request. But if we could do 2 for both of them, Laura, does that work?
I support that.
Is Redmond?
And I'm sorry, I didn't hear anything from Commissioner DeBone on Upper Deschutes River Coalition.
Oh,
500.
he said 500.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
We both said 5, and then we went into a whole explanation of the fundraising and how we want
Okay,
to.
perfect.
Great conversation.
Did you hear that? We want to give Hospice of Redmond and FAN, each of them $2,000
Perfect, I've
for
got
the
that.
fundraising. So
Okay, that's great. And then I have one, unless you have any other questions, I have just one last grant-related item or question for the board. We did receive a follow-up from one of our past grant recipients, the Redmond Chamber. They received, $1,000 during last year's Q2 for their Leadership Redmond program. And they did use $400 for a student scholarship, but they had $600 remaining they were going to use for the county-sponsored day, which never got to happen due to COVID. So they have asked whether the board prefers if they return the funds or roll them over to next year, or if you have a different idea.
Oh, I think they should definitely roll it over to next year.
Okay.
That's what Commissioner DeBone's done with his Pendleton Roundup tickets. He's rolling them over. So, isn't that what you're doing?
Yeah, but there was an email from them today. I wonder what they were trying to say.
Oh, I don't know.
Yes, I did.
So I know I've rolled over a few things. And yes, whatever we can do to help them, that would be great. And thank you for letting us know exactly where they're at. So that's really appreciated.
Of course, thank you.
So can you give me my total? I think I just allocated 4,600. Is that, do you have a total for us?
Let's see here.
It's just a friendly reminder that 21 tickets are on sale now for the
Oh,
penalty
good.
roundup.
I'll have to get mine.
So it looks like 4,600
Yes.
is allocated by Commissioner Adair.
Perfect. That's what I had. Okay. Thank you,
Okay.
Laura.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. So our next item on our agenda is the consideration of the appointments for the Facility Project Review Committee. Thank you, Eric, for joining us, and thank you also for those pictures from this morning's most amazing accident where our county employee was saved, and no one really got hurt in that accident then?
That's what was reported. Nobody was, I mean, that was just
Divine
from our
intervention.
staff, but yeah, that was a pretty significant crash, and
Is that the one where the person was on the vehicle after the accident?
yes,
They were on the vehicle, yes, okay.
yes.
I did hear that story. I didn't know that our county employee was in that accident, so. Okay. Well, thank you. I noticed that you gave a handout of the 7 people, and I'm perfectly happy with the choices you made. I think 7 is a really good number, and I feel like they'll be able to strategize and be very helpful. You've got a good cross-section of people.
And that's the one I'm suggesting, so I'm already bought in too.
Right, your suggestion,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
saying it looks good. So, and Commissioner Henderson isn't here, so, you know,
So yeah, I mean, I would move that we finalize these 7 names in our Facility Project Review Committee and thank all the applicants. Every one of them said they were just ready to give back and participate in their community. I mean, there was a lot of enthusiasm. We have people out there that want to be involved, want to help, care about our community, and it was just a joy to interview each one of them.
Yeah, very quality. Every applicant had their heart in the right spot, and a great group of applicants. Also, I just want to note that even though Commissioner Henderson is not here, 3 of the folks that we're recommending were people that he had reached out to or recommended.
yes. And one of them is my neighbor. So, Jerry, Jerry Milstead, glad to see you're going to be part of the team. So, thank you very much. Do we need an official motion or
I
anything?
think I kind of started with the motion that I.
Okay.
Oh, minutes motion, and then I'll work with Sharon, and we'll get the actual appointment letters on a future board agenda, but minutes motion would be great, and then I can notify all applicants today.
So I'll make that motion.
And I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So thank you very much. If you could follow through with that, Erica, it'd be wonderful.
Be happy to.
Thank you so much. Okay, so do we have other items? Other items?
Yes, I have one. I was waiting to see if any of you were going to go first, but one quick one. You may know, Aramark is the vendor that supplies food for the county jail as well as juvenile detention facility. A couple of years ago, they went through a full RFP process. The sheriff's office did, and awarded the contract to Aramark. So the contract included a couple of 2-year extensions on the original contract. Sheriff's office would like to exercise one of those provisions to extend it for 2 years. They've been providing good service over there. So there was a little bit of confusion over whether that technically needed to come back to the board, since it was you approved the original contract, was done competitively. The extension is worth about north of $1 million, like $1.5 million for that 2-year period. So we'd like to extend that, and so because of the dollar amount, technically the board would need to authorize that. So if you're okay with that, then I'd ask for just a minute's motion to give us the go-ahead to move forward.
Is there, so Aramark is asking? I mean, what's kind of the dynamic when an extension happens? Is
No,
it
the
both
sheriff is-
parties are pleased with the relationship, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, the sheriff drives it. They control this. So even
Okay.
if Aramark wanted to, we couldn't extend it without the blessing and desire of the sheriff's office to
Is the
do so.
contracting, yeah.
So the sheriff's office would like to. Aramark is certainly amenable to doing it. So that's really the ask is, if you're okay with that. Since it was done competitively originally, there was a contract awarded. If you prefer, we could certainly bring it back formally and discuss the mechanics of an extension. But
How long was the first contract for?
it was approved actually in 2017, fiscal 2017. So it's actually been 3 years was the original contract, and so now they're asking for a 2-year authorization to do a 2-year extension.
So how many extensions are, so they can get 2-year or just 1 2-year?
The contract allowed for 3 2-year extensions. That again is driven by the sheriff's office.
And that's 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, all the time, huh? Yeah, well, I've toured the facility a few times and, observed in the kitchen. The meals are appropriate, which is kind of the scenario there. So, yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with this, with the relationship with Aramark. This is kind of a quick decision I hadn't heard of before, but I don't see anything that's negative about it.
Well, I want to know who made the cinnamon rolls when we were there last time, because they had beautiful cinnamon rolls and they were baking and they just got, they just
I remember
pulled them out of the
on
oven.
tray, yep.
And I'm going like, okay, where did those come from? That was pretty awesome. So, okay, so are you?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I'll move a 2-year option renewal for Aramark at the county jail.
And I'll second that. Any further discussion? Mr. DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So thank you very much. I know, I don't think they would want to renew it if there were a lot of screaming people over the quality of the food, so it must be good.
And I just had one other quick one, is something for you to consider. I don't need an answer today. I mentioned this to you, Commissioner Adair, but as you know, you are scheduled to do State of the County presentations to most of our chambers in the county later this month. So in a conversation as part of our, I'm on a task force, looking at different recovery mechanisms with the cities and the chambers. And we were talking about that a little bit. And there's some great information that is discussed in those meetings just about what businesses are going through currently with the pandemic response and trying to recover and reopen and so forth. So we kind of came up with the idea that perhaps sort of flip the State of the County around. If you all would like to hear a presentation, put together by the chambers along with the business advocates at Bend and Redmond, sort of a state of the industry, back to you on to discuss much of the information that is discussed in this meeting in terms of the challenges, the successes, the needs of businesses in each of our cities. These days, what they're facing.
Would that be during the same session?
No, it would be separate. It would be something that we'd schedule for one of your upcoming board meetings, Monday or Wednesday, just for, pretty informal, but to give you sort of a snapshot of, what businesses are facing. And I realize that you have a lot of contacts, a lot of interaction with the community, and I think you probably have a pretty good idea already, but this would be something more formal that was kind of a compilation of information put together by the cities and the chamber. There would be no ask with it. It would just be a discussion.
Because there are so many complications to COVID response in Oregon, and then, with our unemployment, what is it at now, 8+, something like that, 8, it's up there. And then I heard today that Georgia's unemployment, because they're back actually open, their unemployment is down at 5%. So I know I would definitely appreciate hearing from people that are out there and, what they're dealing with, and maybe how we can help in a way that we didn't realize.
Well, yeah, I'd be very supportive of hearing from the chambers, the industries that are being affected. I know that there's analysis going down, being provided at multiple levels. The state economist is my point. But yeah, it's important for us to have this information, think it through. This is a transition in society. I think of the scenario where, I've had a camera on my phone and on my laptop for many years, but all of a sudden we're using them. I was in, 2 video conferences before this meeting this morning already with people around the state. So we are in a technical revolution on top of COVID and different things going on too. So I'd love to hear from them.
Great, thank you. I'll set it up.
Speaking of COVID, our number today unfortunately was 7. Yesterday, fortunately, it was 2. So anytime I get a number, now I divide it in half. And so, that's, it just seems like sometimes, the numbers that were really low were fabulous. And now we're dealing with numbers that seem to creep up higher. The fact that we had 85 positives this last week is really unfortunate. So just hoping that our kids can get back in school sooner than later. The metrics from the state are supposed to change, and I do have a meeting tomorrow morning regarding that at 8:30. So hopefully we'll hear some good news.
Yeah, so I didn't bring anything else for other items today.
Right. Okay. All right. So do we have an executive session now?
We don't. The one that we had kind of tentatively thought about was the Veterans Village.
And we've moved
we
to
discussed earlier,
Monday.
that'll be Monday.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So no more business? Okay. There being no further business today on our agenda, we will adjourn our meeting, and we will be having our next meeting Monday afternoon at 1 p.m. So join us then. Our COVID meeting is always on Wednesdays if you're interested in COVID. And please know that today we did add Spanish. So those parties that want to see our COVID, it will be available in Spanish at this simultaneously. So I think that's really a great step on part of our team. Thank you so much, Whitney, for putting that together. And
Thank you.
great. Thank you, guys.